to our YouTube channel, as well as follow our page on Facebook. Please note that we receive hundreds of requests and it takes around 7 days or so to process all the certificates. If you do not receive your certificate after a week, please feel free to send us a message on Facebook or email us at FUSE-PNU-FilSciHub@gmail.com. So again, welcome po sa FilSciHub. Welcome to all our Zoom participants and our YouTube live viewers. For those who are new and may not be familiar with who we are and what we do, allow me to share our mission and vision in the next few minutes. Filipino Science Hub is an online platform founded by our CEO, Filipino scientist Dr. Jeffrey Camacho Bunkin, back in 2012. Currently, we are a registered nonprofit organization based in Houston, Texas, United States. Our mission is to promote STEM education and the culture of research among students and teachers in the Philippines and abroad. Our current global leadership team is comprised of volunteer Filipino scientists and seasoned STEM educators from different parts of the world. Our vision is to see a technology and innovation-driven Philippines, and we believe that this can be achieved by creating a new generation of well-rounded Filipino STEM enthusiasts. This vision is being carried out via our two major programs, the FilSciHub Ed program and FilSciHub Research University. Through FilSciHub Ed, we are able to empower and support our teachers when it comes to strengthening STEM fundamentals education. We believe that this is important because the more equipped our STEM educators are, the more they can inspire our students to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Through this program, we have been able to serve our teachers by creating STEM teaching modules as well as conducting teachers training webinars, all of which are accessible on our website for free. So we have also been able to collaborate with major educational organizations that have the same goals and advocacies as Filipino Science Hub. Through these partnerships, we have been able to further expand our reach and help more students and teachers, especially during the time of pandemic. So together, everybody achieves more. The other major program that drives our vision forward is FilSciHub Research University. We believe that in order to strengthen a STEM culture, students also need to be able to learn how to conduct a scientific research. As we know, many scientific and technological breakthroughs happened through research, and we would like to equip our younger generation by providing them proper scientific research training. So ika nga po, start them young. Here at FilSciHub Research University, we provide free courses on fundamentals of scientific research, such as research ideation, literature review, how to write a research proposal, how to communicate your research work to the scientific community, among other courses. Through this program, we are also able to bring practicing scientists closer to the STEM educational sector. So because of this closer contact, our students become more aware of the possible STEM career paths available for them and how these careers contribute to the advancement of the society around them. So up to date, we have been able to reach over 70,000 students and teachers all over the world. And we know that this will continue to grow in the years to come. And this is why we are all very excited on what is in store here at FilSciHub. Our official website is www.filscihub.com. This is where you can access all our materials such as webinars, tutorials, modules, virtual lab, and special features. We are also present in several social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. So follow us wherever you're most active on to get updated with our web events. So again, thank you for being with us this morning. And to officially start our webinar, I would like to turn the virtual floor over to our host for today.
Ayan, magandang umaga po sa ating mga manonood sa Pilipinas at sa kung saan pamangdako ng mundo na naaabot ng Filipino Science Hub. So maraming salamat po sa patuloy na pagsubaybay sa STEM Teaching Webinar Series na binuo ng FilSciHub sa pamamagitan ng pakikipag-ugnayan sa dalawang uh, educational institutions sa Pilipinas. Ito ay ang FUSE at ang PNU or Philippine Normal University. So ayan, hello po sa ating mga viewers. Special mention natin ang ating mga teachers and students na viewers natin from Bicol. Sa ibang mga former speakers natin sa FilSciHub. Nakita ko sila sa Zoom meeting natin today. So kasi ang speaker natin ngayon ay hailing from Bicol. Nasa Bicol din siya ngayon. Ayan. So hello din sa lahat ng mga viewers natin sa YouTube. Bago pa natin makalimutan, streaming tayo sa YouTube ngayon. And salamat sa walang sawa ninyong pagsuporta sa FilSciHub. So to formally start our session today, here's our founder and CEO, Dr. Jeffrey Bunkin, for a few important reminders.
Okay, magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Muli ako po si Jeffrey Bunkin, ang founder ng Filipino Science Hub. So I'm dialing in all the way from Houston, Texas, and your host for today, Dr. Jana Sabrilla Hintz, is calling in all the way from Kansas in the United States. So muli, welcome po dito sa isa na namang installment ng ating PNU-FilSciHub STEM Teaching Webinar Series. So ito pong webinar series na ito ay produkto ng pagsasanib puwersa ng tatlong mga organisasyon na naglalayo na ma-elevate ang quality ng pagtuturo ng STEM sa Pilipinas. So FUSE stands for the Foundation for the Upgrading of the Standard of Education. So it's the foundation under the Lushutan Group of Companies po. And then Philippine Normal University, one of the top education universities in the country. So kaya po dito nanggagaling yung ating mga eksperto when it comes to pedagogy. And then Filipino Science Hub naman po. And so what this STEM Teaching Webinar Series brings you is a collection of training courses on pedagogical skills, and then at the same time, innovative and practical STEM strategies brought to you by leaders in education training and by Filipino scientists. So ito po, nakikita ninyo, nagsanib po ang karamihan po ng ating mga eksperto din sa FUSE at sa PNU ay education leaders naman po. And then sa FilSciHub, dito nanggagaling naman po ang ating mga Filipino scientists. So ito pong formula na to, yung pagbalanse ng pedagogy at innovative STEM teaching strategies is a paradigm shift that we're trying to test out in the Philippines. And paano ba yung magiging impact nito? Lalong-lalo na sa mga estudyante, ng mga guro natin na makakapulot ng mga aral na ituturo po natin dito sa programang ito. And to be specific po, ang ating pong pedagogical and practical STEM teaching courses ay may tig-apat na topics. So sa pedagogical courses po, ng mga nauna po nating mga linggo, si Sir Brando Palomar po, Professor Brando Palomar from PNU, he delivered a talk focusing on the underpinnings of STEM teachings. Ano pa yung basics ng pagtuturo ng STEM. Professor Sheila Sia talked about strategies on how to create modules naman po. And then last week, Sir Chris John Mejia Pastor talked about how to deliver virtual lectures. And then today naman po, ang ating speaker ay si Sir Alfons Jayson Pelgone on assessment strategies. And then on the side naman po of Filipino scientists from FilSciHub, ang amin naman pong na-deliver na so far ay tatlo. The first of which is on the importance of effective STEM teaching. So, mga scientists po ang nagpaliwanag niyan. Ano ba talaga yung benepisyo? Ano ba yung kahalagahan ng maayos sa pagkaturo ng STEM? Secondly, Professor Dindy Voiles and Professor Michelle Lansigan from American University discussed or shared some practical and innovative strategies on how to teach STEM. So ito po mga professors natin sa higher education. nagsishare po sa inyo ano ba yung mga pamamaraan ngayon na ginagamit for halimbawa dito sa Amerika at ng ibang mga mas advanced na educational programs. Third naman po was a topic that was delivered by Professor May Joan Aguila from UP Los Baños, Professor Chester Dabalos from the University of Hawaii, and then Marty Mateo from the Institute of Plant Breeding. So they discussed some strategies on how to design lab experiments and virtual labs. So talaga napapanahon po ngayon yan, lalo-lalo na yung virtual labs. Ano po. And then at the end po of October, so October 30th, Dr. Analet Carrasco and Mr. JP Onya, who is the head of FilSciHub Research University, will talk about fundamentals of research teaching. So, paano ba ang pagtuturo ng research sa elementary at sa high school level? So, yan naman po yung ituturo sa inyo. Bali po, we're working on accrediting this training course po in such a way na kapag natapos po ninyo i-take itong lahat ng 8 courses na to, we might be able to incentivize this na makakakuha po ng CPD units ang mga guro. And then in case some of you po may not, if some of you hindi nyo nakuha yung mga naunang webinars, all of these have been recorded and uploaded on FilSciHub's YouTube channel. So dun po, pwede nyo pong balikan, and dun sa description box ng bawat recording, nandun din po yung link on how to request for a certificate of participation. So yun po. Muli po, itong programang ito is brought to you by FUSE-PNU and by Filipino Science Hub. And we hope that you actually enjoy today's session, that you learn a lot, and most importantly, kung ano man po yung natututunan nyo sa bawat kurso dito ay may apply po ninyo sa pagtuturo ninyo sa araw-araw. Maraming salamat po. Back to you, Janice.
Ayan. Yung maka-unmute kanina. Ayan. So, to formally introduce our speaker, ang speaker natin ngayong umaga ay isang full-time faculty member ng Philippine Normal University, Manila. He handles courses in various areas of physics, such as nuclear science and electricity and magnetism. Along with this, he's also focused on the pedagogies and contemporary issues and perspectives of science education in the undergraduate and graduate levels. He also graduated magna cum laude for his bachelor's degree in physics for teachers at PNU. His passion for physics teaching continued as he finished his master's in applied physics, major in medical physics at the University of Santo Tomas. At present, he's doing his PhD in science education at PNU, with focus on teacher preparation and standards, which is very timely para sa atin ngayon ng mga online teaching. So marami tayong matututunan kay sir. So over the years, he's been involved in various educational programs of DepEd, DOST, local government units, and other public and private educational institutions. So some of his most interesting projects include a PNU-funded initiative to create learning kits for science in the early grades, and the projects of the DOST SEI involving the recent national search for the most innovative teaching and learning resources, or InnoBox project. So later, baka ma-mention din ni sir yung mga projects na to. So our speaker has such an impressive list of achievements, and our team is so grateful and proud that we are joined today by none other than Sir Alfons Jayson Pelgone, a fellow Aragon from Albay. So Sir Alfons will be talking about STEM teaching assessment strategies today. So makinig tayong lahat. Sir Alfons, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Ma'am Janice Averilia. So, a fellow Bicolano, not only by blood, by heart, and by birth, di ba? Ayan. So, good morning, everyone. I saw some familiar names. Anyways, I'll just share first my screen before we have the formal discussion, and maybe insert some chismisan along the way. All right. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Anyways,
Yes,
okay
sir.
naman, Mama, na all right.
Yes.
So, Good morning, everyone, and I hope you are well and safe. And like what I said, it is really a pleasure, an opportunity, and an honor to be invited and be part of this platform, no, to help out teachers who are teaching, especially in this time of the pandemic. So a while ago, they've already talked about the previous webinars. And this is interesting because if you noticed, we talked about perspectives and then the modules, which are very timely in the time of the pandemic, and of course, delivering online or virtual lectures from friends in the academe, Dr. Palomar, Dr. Sia, and Dr. Pastor. So today, we will be talking about assessments in STEM education or assessment in STEM education. I changed the title from the PubMat, but essentially it's the same, all right? And there are some people messaging me. Yes, good morning everyone. And those from Morms, hello everyone. I also graduated from that school. I think. Yes, I think you have teachers from Morse. All right. So mamaya ko na po kayo babalikan mga ma'am, sir. And of course, I think there are also some students here. My students at PNU, graduate students, and some PNU alumni. So magandang umaga po. And I'm excited to talk with you very soon. Ano? And maybe after this, we can talk. Okay, so if you notice in the title slide, I placed there assessments in STEM education and then the new normal edition. So why did I place that? No, because the phrase new normal became a buzzword this time, and more often than not, we it's actually part of our common conversations, diba? When we talk, we always include pandemic, new normal, work from home, modules, things like that. These are buzzwords in the time of the pandemic. But we do have to remember that the new normal phrase is not necessarily new. Now, before the pandemic, OECD already used the word new normal to mean the future of education. So, meaning prior to the pandemic, educational systems all over the world would actually foresee that education would embrace a new normal. And that is because of high technology. The society migrating to a very, very high level of technology. And that is the new normal. So there are disruptions and disruptors, and we need to adapt to these disruptors by embracing a new normal. And now our disruptor is not only the high technology, but also the health crisis we often call COVID-19. All right. Now, in this case, in 2020, most of our colleagues in the academy, especially from PNU, friends like Dr. Pastor, Dr. Sia, Dr. Palomar, Professor Butron, hello, Professor Clerigo, Dr. Cortez, Dr. Sarmiento, and some other people, we actually were invited to do a lot of talks in migrating our education online. And I realized that when you look at teaching in the new normal, you talk about roles. Okay, roles not only of learners but also roles of teachers. So what are our expectations of our teachers in the new normal? Because the new normal, as we call it now, in the context of the pandemic, is very different from what we know, the context of how we teach before. So I think if you let me share to you this idea, the teacher in the new normal becomes number one an IT expert, di ba? Some people might say, paano naman naging IT expert po kami? Hindi naman po kami nag-aral ng IT. But you have to realize in the short span of time, you were able to, maximize the use of Google Classroom, di ba? You were able to learn from YouTube, of a lot of things, no? How to plant, how to do this and that, and even maximize, doing your Excel sheets and stuff that you don't really focus on before the pandemic, di ba? Some of you didn't even try to work online before the pandemic, but the pandemic made us so-called IT experts. Apart from that, we became e-classroom managers. We manage a classroom that's not a physical classroom. And that's, I think, a big success for everybody. Apart from that, we cannot say no and we cannot forget the idea that we are still content authorities. I will always say this, and my students in graduate school and my students in the undergraduate would know that I always tell them that Filipino teachers are good teachers. Magaling magturo ang mga Pilipinong guro. Okay? Magaling silang magturo. Okay? So we have to take a look at this, content authorities, and then survival coach. Many of us receive messages in the middle of the night, no, from our students saying, "Ma'am, sir, hindi po ako nakapag-submit because of this and that." And we became advisors, no, to these students, and we tried to inspire them to pursue learning and continue learning despite the hardships of the pandemic. And what I really like is the fifth. Okay, what I really like in this idea is the fifth. I think that the teacher in the new normal is a co-learner. Aminin nyo, no? Let's be realistic, no? Let's be honest. The pandemic is a learning experience for all of us. We've learned a lot. Okay, so we are co-learners like our students, and we are not only co-learners, we are also co-assessors of learning. One thing I realized during the pandemic is we need to share our responsibilities. Before the pandemic, there was a shift to the role of the teacher being the sage on the stage. Di ba noon? Kung sino yung teacher, siya yung may alam. Siya yung nagsusulat sa blackboard that the students copy and listen. Di ba? Kasi yung teacher yung may alam lamang. Eventually, nagkaroon ng pagbabago or ng shift. Our students now became at the center of our classrooms and we became facilitators on the sides. But now, we now share everything to them, even assessing learning. Ibig sabihin, students have also that responsibility to assess how much they've learned or if they learned. If they learned talaga, baka wala naman, no? So they are now also assessors of their own learning, and also the other key players of the teaching and learning process, like their parents, their guardians, their kuyas and ates, and whoever is in their house, helping them finish the modules. Now, if you will like to embrace these roles, I believe we will be able to, achieve what I call as holistic learners, because I think this is something that we dream about, even in the depth ed or in the basic education. We want holistic learners who are adaptive to societal disruptions. No one can tell if there will be another crisis or another disruption or disruptor in the future. But if our learners are taught well, are given enough survival skills, maybe they will become better learners than today, who will be able to adapt and respond to the upcoming or the forthcoming societal disruptions, be it man-made or natural. All right. Now, it's sad to note that the pandemic has displaced a lot of people, workers, and on our end, our students. Our students were displaced, according to UNESCO and UNICEF, about 168 million children were actually displaced from their schools. When you say displaced, they cannot even afford to go to an online class because of the pandemic. And we can never discount the fact that this article exists. By 2019, in January 22, the World Bank released this document concerning the learning crisis. And the learning crisis, as they define, is not an education crisis alone, because they're two different things. Meaning, the students going to school might not literally learn, no? Ibig sabihin, hindi porket nakakapasok yung bata, natututo siya, no? And that crisis is what we refer to as the learning crisis. So it's being in school is not equated to learning. So now, does it also mean that being in the virtual classroom is not equated to learning? So that's something that we need to ponder on. Okay. Now, we also need to realize regarding that learning crisis issue, that students' demonstration of mastery of various domains of learning objectives has not necessarily equated with a demonstration of their capacities in real-world settings. Ano ibig sabihin nun, no? Hindi nakikita, no? Hindi natin nakikita. For example, in the classrooms, they were taught to do these things. But eventually, when they're asked to do it in the real world, they cannot do it or perform it. So there must be something wrong with the transfer of learning. That's why we need to strengthen or fortify the process of teaching and learning. So maybe you'll agree with me when I say being in school does not equate to learning. Being able to submit a module may not equate to learning. Therefore, we need to get our act, properly, collaborate and so on, because we need to work for our kids. Now, these kids, they're really depending on us. Hello, Sir Rabutan. Hi. All right. Now, of course, when we talk about education, we talk about three important constructs: the curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment. Of course, my topic is basically on assessment. However, talking about assessment without pinpointing or redirecting to the curriculum and instruction is useless, because assessment is just part of this process wherein you integrate the curriculum, the instruction, and assessment. If these three aren't aligned to each other, then any part will be useless. Okay, so I think that as we move forward to a new normal and even the post-COVID world, we have to realize that the alignment of these three, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, taken in the context of the real world, is very important. Okay, I think this is very important. Now, if you notice, the curriculum, the perspectives were discussed by Dr. Palomar prior to this talk. In terms of instruction, you talk about the SLMs or the modules, and then virtual sessions given by Dr. Pastor and Dr. Sia. And now we'll try to finish the triumvirate, which is basically on assessment. Okay, so in one project that we are a part of, led by Dr. Morales, Dr. Maripas Morales, one of the main goals of science teaching is to be able to move forward or to transition from transmissive teaching to what we refer to as interest-driven pedagogies. So we want our learners to be interest-driven. We want them to have that interest, and we want them to be engaged even if we have a different context as of the moment. Okay, I'll talk about the Esta project later on. Okay, so medyo madami na po ako nasabi, no, pero introduction lang po talaga yon. So ganun po kami dito sa sa Bicol. Ganun po kami magkwento, may introduction po talaga muna. Well, anyways, I would like to talk about the following. Number one, focus on some definitions of classroom assessment. If there are teachers here who are not science teachers or STEM teachers, that is okay. That is okay, because the idea of assessment is not it's not for science or STEM alone, di ba? It's for all subjects and for the educational process as a whole. And then we would like to look into where is that assessment, okay, in the PH or the Philippine STEM education in terms of basic ed and higher education. Then we will talk about assessment strategies in STEM education in the new normal. I will give some examples. When I say examples, most of these are taken from my class. Okay, so if I have some of my students here, I've informed you that I will be showing some of your outputs. And I will talk about ways forward in terms of the education process, basically on assessment. Okay, so teachers, especially in the basic education, we are well aware of what we refer to as classroom assessment. And of course, one of the siguro buzzword na rin to, no, when you mentioned DepEd Order number 8, diba, for classroom assessment, given last 2015, no, which was actually was this? There were documents that supported this when the DepEd, the basic education, transitioned to the learning continuity plans. So I have here some sources, including the classroom assessment resource book of DepEd and policies, DepEd orders, no, policies and guidelines for assessment prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. So what is assessment? According to the DepEd Order number 8 on classroom assessment or CA is basically the ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Very important yung process, yung mga in-identify natin na nag-end sa ing, di ba? And the type of data or information which is quantitative, these are the marks, or this may be in the form of comments, di ba? And the last part is very important. What learners know, we address this by the content standards, and can do, we address this by the performance standards. Okay, apart from that, we cannot discount the fact that assessment is an integral part of the curriculum implementation. Okay, so like what I said a while ago, the three things, you cannot have assessment without curriculum and instruction. Okay, so it's part of how you implement a curriculum. And here we allow our teachers, we give them the responsibility to track, so that's like formative, and measure being able to measure learners' progress, no, and to adjust their instruction accordingly. Meaning, assessment is also a learning experience for the teacher. Am I going too fast? Am I teaching it too fast? Am I giving too difficult items? Am I giving too easy items? So this will actually inform my teaching. Okay. And it also informs our learners as well as their parents and the other key players in the classroom setup, in the home classroom setup of their progress. That is very important. Now, in terms of talking about effective 21st century assessments, because 21st century education is also a buzzword, we talk about three P's. In the Philippines, mostly you talk about four P's, right? But that's with DSWD, I think. But here, let's talk about three P's. And what do we assess? We assess three things: the process, the progress, and the performance. So it's very important to look into this. When you are teaching, the process at which you engage your learners that you are a part of, you assess that. The progress of the learners, you also assess that, and their performance. So this is very interesting to take note of. So tatandaan nyo po yung three P's, no? Actually, there are a lot of P's that you can remember in terms of buzzwords. The three P's for assessment, the four P's in the DSWD for the Philippines, and the five P's for the Sustainable Development Goals. Ayan. Now, when we talk about assessment, what do we assess? Assessment of what? Okay, first, we assess prior learning, right? I think it's a lot easier to do this when we were in face-to-face because you don't only assess via the diagnostic exams, you're also able to assess by looking at them, no? By assessing them informally, no? So we have pre-assessments or diagnostics, which include the pre-test, pre-activities, as well as we identify how good they are in terms of prerequisites. We do have to remember that there are prerequisites. I'll give an example. In the STEM strand of the senior high school, you should not be able to go to Physics 2 if you're not well with Physics 1, diba? Or in the same way with the other courses or subjects with prerequisites. Very important yung prerequisites. Now, another thing that we assess is learning as a process. So while we teach, we assess learning. We assess learning. So we talk about formative or developmental forms of assessment. So pag nagtuturo po ba ako, nag-a-assess po ba ako? Opo. Diba? So these are activities, and of course when we teach we have checkpoint questions. Okay? So we have to insert those questions along the way. Later on I'll show some examples that will point to this. And of course learning as an outcome. So when they finish the course, what did they get? What do they become? What are they able to do? So it becomes a form of summative as well as evaluative assessments. And like, for example, the post-tests and application activities, no? So pwedeng application activities or performance. Ayan, wag nating kakalimutan to, guys. Okay, so in terms of the classroom assessment resource book of DepEd, there are 5 aims of classroom assessment. Okay, what are these? Number 1, to interpret and evaluate each learner's performance against curriculum standards and competencies. That is why I've always said that the teacher must understand the curriculum. Well, basically the curriculum guide. Okay, because the standards, the competencies are there. Okay, and the teacher must study it as a whole before starting with the teaching process. Okay, so binabangga, no, we align the performance of the learners to these standards and competencies. Number 2, we would like to look at the learners' strengths and areas for improvement. San siya magaling, san pa siya gagaling, no? I think that is the most important purpose of assessment, to know where the learners are. On the part of the learners, to also know how they can be better. The third one is to give immediate and constructive feedback to learners about what they have done well and areas that they need to work on, and tips on how to improve these. Now, let's be honest. During the time of the pandemic, there were instances that we weren't able to give appropriate constructive feedback. because of some adjustments in the, you know, the frequent change in the community quarantine, what do you call that, the restrictions, and oftentimes you were not able to retrieve the modules as easily and so on. So most of us were just able to give and retrieve. It's to give and to retrieve these modules. And eventually, some of us tried to give constructive feedback, but some proved to be in vain, no? Big sabihin, hindi nagamit, no? Hindi nagamit ng mga bata because they were too engrossed to finish the next module. So they weren't, they didn't have time to move forward and improve or innovate, no? Where they are not very good at. So hopefully we can work on this in this time. Now, the fourth one is reflect on the effectiveness of your teaching. Now, I know we are teaching differently. We have different contexts. Some of you are teaching online, some via modular, some via radio-based, some via TV, and so on and so forth. So, looking at the feedback, looking at the comments, looking at the interaction of the teachers and the learners and how we get those responses from parents and other key players, it allows us to recalibrate what we are doing in our classrooms, be it online or modular. Apart from that, we need to gather evidence over time of learners' progress across against the standards. So this is now a way to inform the curriculum, no? A way to inform for curriculum reform, curricular reform. All right. Now, may nagtanong, no? Bakit ko po to kailangang pagpaguran, no? Bakit kailangan stress ako sa assessment? Oo, bakit? Because we are teachers, especially in the basic education. We now have the PPST, the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers. And in the standard, you have in Domain 5, assessment and reporting. So it makes it clear that assessment and reporting is a responsibility of the teacher. So ano nakalagay dyan? 5, no? There are 5 strands. And I would like to highlight this strands. Number 1, use and create, design, select available and of course applicable assessment strategies. Diba? Gumawa ng assessment strategies and tools. Pangalawa, to monitor and evaluate the learner progress. Pangatlo, mag-feedback. Pang-apat, makipag-usap, no? Not only to the learners, no, but to their parents and to the stakeholders na mayroong kumbaga may buy-in, no, in when it comes to assessment. And of course, to use assessment data to enhance teaching and learning practices and programs. So ibig sabihin, if I'm thinking of an initiative or an innovation in my teaching, I can use assessment data as a needs assessment to this initiative. Malay nyo, makaisip po kayo ng bagong InnoBox. Di ba nabanggit ni Ma'am Janice kanina? InnoBox by DOST-SEI is a competition for the most innovative teaching and learning resource. So maybe your assessment data may inform you on how to create your next innovation in the classroom. Now, that's it, no, for some backgrounders, some definitions. Most of you are familiar with those things. Now, let us ask, where is that A in the Philippine STEM education? And that is not dun sa STEAM na arts, no, but assessment. Let's focus on assessment. Now, in terms of the basic education, you can see this in the curriculum guide, the one released in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the conceptual framework of science education. So where is assessment there? You can see it. It's very clear. No, it's on the left. You can see assessment there, and you can also see the overall goal, which is basically to create or to to produce learners who are scientific and technologically literate. So there's assessment there, and it's an important pillar or an important construct that supports that process of teaching and learning. And of course, the ones below are basically pedagogies. Okay? So nandun yung assessment, no? Hindi mawawala ang assessment sa isang framework for science education. Now, in terms of higher education, in 2019, the group of Morales et al., Dr. Maripaz Morales, created the Philippine STEAM education model. And where is assessment here? Now, if you will see, the outermost of the concentric circle, circles. You can see their pedagogical practices, the way we teach, integration of technology, and here is assessment. So this assessment, technology integration, and instruction, okay, support as we move to the center of this framework. And what's the center of this framework? The learner, or eventually the STEAM professional. So the idea of this framework is to focus on the learner who will eventually become the professionals who will become part of our STEM or STEAM professions. And the pandemic has made clear that the Philippines needs STEM. The Philippines needs science, technology, research, engineering, mathematics. Kailangan natin and education will play an important role in that particular idea. Apart from that, I think I was able to mention this in the introduction, that we have this framework that's recently developed by the team of Dr. Morales, which we are a part of. It's called the Science Education for Linguistic and Cultural Diversity in Philippine Public Higher Education. Now, this framework was created as part of the project funded by the European Union, and it's called Educating Science Teachers for All. So the idea of for all sounds like inclusion, right? So it allows us to look into science education for everybody through teachers. Kanina, yung sa TPAC, the focus is the learners. But here, our focus is actually empowering the teachers to be able to deliver inclusive science education. So the team members are here. I'd like to greet Dr. Pastor, Dr. Alido, Dr. Reyes, Dr. Marasigan, Dr. Cortez, Prof. Ruel Avila, of course, Dr. Morales, and Ma'am Galit. Okay? So here, nasaan po yung assessment, sir, sa framework na yan? Nandun po sa processes of teaching and learning na nakapalibot po dito sa idea na to, no? Ayan po, no, the teachers create, plan, and act, assess, evaluate, reflect, and again create. So nakita natin yung process na pinagdadaanan at ginagawa ng mga guru natin to be able to deliver or enact what we refer to as an inclusive science curriculum. So what are these things sa paligid, no? So we have Filipino learners. Bakit po nandun yung Filipino learners? Because remember, we cannot teach well if we do not know our learners. So the diversity of learners, the context of the learners, the language of the learners, these are things that we need to understand so that we will be able to teach them well, diba? And then here we have your pedagogies. Of course, we will not discount the many pedagogies like constructivism, social constructivism, other frameworks like the Bagong Kadawian Kaway Aralan sa Bagong Kadawian, that's the PNU flexible learning framework. And of course, here we have teacher knowledge. So meaning to say, merong kaalaman si teacher, no? May kaalaman siya kung paano i-enact ang curriculum. Bakit po, sir, napunta ka sa curriculum? Di ba assessment naman po yung sinasabi mo? I would like to repeat one of my first statements a while ago, that we cannot talk about assessment if we do not talk about alignment to the curriculum and instruction. Okay? So, kabit-kabit po yun, no? Ayan. So, the teacher's knowledge, understanding of Filipino learners, and of course, the capacity to use all of those pedagogies will help that teacher enact a curriculum, a science curriculum that is inclusive. Okay? So, if you want to learn more about the Esta Project or the Educating Science Teachers for All, like what I said, funded by the European Union, you can go to Facebook and look for this handle, Philippines Esta Community. The project, we have two projects, one spearheaded by the De La Salle University and one of the Philippine Normal University. So sundan niyo po yun and expect more information, no, which will be published online. All right. Now, let's now talk about assessments in STEM Ed in the new normal. Andito na naman tayo sa new normal na yan, ano? So, yan. Now, wala naman siguro nagtatanong, no? So, dito na tayo sa assessment strategies in the new normal. Actually, wala naman masyadong nag-iba, no? Okay. In the new normal, one thing that I can really think about, and I think it's funny also at some point, is we often ask of the question of what's essential. Naalala nyo ba yon? Nung pumasok tayo ng new normal, nagkaroon ng maraming debate, what is essential, and so on and so forth, no? And even the idea of lugaw becoming essential, well, it has been an issue, no? So ano ba talaga yung essential, no? Even debates became more philosophical towards the end. Of course, we will not engage in such debates, and we will not talk about what is more essential or most essential, and so on and so forth as regards to lugaw. Now, why did I, redirect to that? Remember, in basic ed, during the pandemic, you had the MELCs, the most essential learning competencies. Okay, so DepEd tried to work on removing some and focusing on most essential. One thing that I know about the most essential learning competencies are these are the competencies that the learners will not learn if not taught. Ibig sabihin, hindi nila matututunan pag hindi naituro sa classroom, sa module, or so on. That's why they're called most essential. And that they are most essential because the learners need these, okay, for lifelong learning, to become more resilient, to survive in the 21st century VUCA world, and so on and so forth. Okay. So ayan, may milk, no? Alam nyo naman, it sounds like milk, no? But it's milk. So actually, yesterday, I was creating some buzzwords of my own, no? Kasi this became part of our jargon, no? Our common conversations. So pag mga teachers, maririnig mo nag-uusap, nagawa mo na ba yung sa milks, mga ganyan? May LAS, may SLM, and so on and so forth. So I created some of the acronyms that I would like to include. So kung may milk, merong meal teas. Ano naman yung meal teas? Ang meal teas ay most essential and appropriate learning and teaching strategies. Bakit ko naisip yon? Kung meron kang competency which will serve more or less like an outcome or an objective that you would like to go through when you teach, that must be supplemented and aligned to how you teach it. So meron kang, kung may essential competency ka, meron ka dapat na appropriate learning and teaching strategy. So that's one part of the alive. So may milk, may milk, may meal teas, and may mesa. 'Di ba? Para puro pagkain. Okay, ano naman po yung mesa? Most essential or appropriate strategies for assessment. Yeah, para ma-align ko lang po yung milk, yung meal teas, and yung mesa. Bakit na naman may mesa? Kasi may instruction ka na eh, 'di ba? Alam mo na kung paano mo ituturo yung milk. Ngayon dapat alam mo din kung paano mo i-assess kung natutunan yung milk, 'di ba? And often in the higher education, we call that constructive alignment. Of course, we give proper credit to Professor Biggs. And this one, I got this from the link there. Okay, this is the a visual of how you do constructive alignment. So the model for constructive alignment is up there on the upper left. So you see that we try to bridge and align the outcomes, which are reflected, for example, in basic ed to the competencies, the learning activities that we create in the classroom, and of course, assessment and feedback. Like what I said, that these should be aligned. If they're not aligned, walang silbi yung bawat isang proseso. Alam nyo yon, they will not support each other. I think Dr. Sheila in her talk talked about scaffolding. I will use the word reinforcement. Each of these should reinforce each other because an educational process or a teaching and learning experience is not only instruction and assessment. It's not only curriculum, but all of these three aligned. Okay, so here, if you notice, you have your competencies, then your assessments, the activities, and of course, the resources that you align. Hindi po ito labanan ng padamihan ng activity, di ba? Hindi ito padamihan ng assessments or even your resources. These are the choice of appropriate and aligned activities and assessments. So hindi po ito pakapalan ng SLM. No, it's not that I have a very lengthy SLM and that's great. Okay, the SLM should be appropriate and it should target the competencies that you want as measured by your assessment strategies. Okay? So, ayan, may pumapasok. Sir Benji Kadag, hello. I think he's from Sorsogon. The EPS in Science of Sorsogon, nakita ko lang. And in the new normal, hindi nagbago yung assessment methods natin. Okay? In the classroom assessment resource book, there are a few detailed.
Okay, what are these? Number one, observation. Okay, so teachers can make formal and informal observations of the learner's performance based on certain assessment criteria. Diba? Noong mga unang panahon, wala pang pandemic, in the classroom when my students are doing their lab, I will go around and observe what they're doing. I will observe and immediately I will know, itong batang to, hindi niya alam ang ginagawa niya. 'Di ba? Yung paghawak pa lang nung gamit, alam mo na kung marunong or hindi or binasa ng bata yung pre-lab, mga ganon. So observation is very important. And today, minigrate din natin yung observation. You can migrate by looking at their forum posts. You can observe by looking at their chats, no? And of course, you can also observe by other means, including the synchronous sessions. Second, talking to learners. Ginagawa na natin to before. We do this before. And we often call this conferencing, no? Now it became video conferencing. Well, apart from the class that we hold, we can often talk to our learners. There are teachers, I would just want to say this because I really support and I really would like to commend, all the efforts of our teachers in the grassroots, in the far-flung areas, in the coastal barangays and so on. They would often use their own phones to call the students and so on. So I would like to say thank you for doing that because that is a way to assess. Apart from that is to focus on learners' products. During the new normal, the time of the pandemic, most of our outputs were assessed via this mode. Di ba, pinasubmit nyo yung mga SLMs, pinasubmit nyo yung mga ginawa nilang products, and then you assess or analyze these outputs. Okay? You analyze their outputs. Apart from that, we gave regular tests. I remember during the first time that we migrated teaching online, yung mga unang nagtutalk po kami regarding new normal education, buo pa yun, no? Hindi lang assessment, I always get this question. Ang tanong lagi, paano po akong papa-exam? How will I give an exam? Unang taon pa po, nung start pa po ng pandemic to ha, I will talk about how to teach, how to and stuff. And some people will ask, paano ako magpapa-exam? And I will often respond by asking, is that really the first thing that you can think of when you talk about teaching? Yung exam. I mean, this time of the pandemic is a special time. And apart from knowing how to assess, which is very important, the one more important thing is knowing how to teach and of course focusing on that learning experience of our learners. Okay, so yung magpapa-exam, it might have been too traditional already. I remembered when I was in high school, every Friday in one subject, we will have an exam, a long quiz. And I would remember we would have to, cram for that exam. And usually there are three ways to get a good score. Number one, if you're really good, no, nag-aral ka ng simula sa simula. Number two, magaling ang short-term memory mo. Or yung number three, hindi ko nababanggitin. Anong punto ko doon, no? Before, no, assessment became a tradition. Bakit ka nagpapa-exam? Nasanayan ko na pa-exam. We have to look at assessment now to serve a better purpose. And what is it? To inform. Inform who? The learners, the teachers, the parents. And most essentially, no, I would like to focus on the learners. Napakahalaga nun kasi alam mo dapat bilang learner, asan ka at saan ka pupunta. So, dapat yun yung focus ng assessment. Not to brand the student, ay bagsak ka. Of course, pwede naman talaga bumagsak ang bata. Pero is it really just branding the learners na mahina or magaling sila? When in fact, we can look at it na dito ka mahina, pero pwede mo pa yang galingan. And if we can refocus, I think, our view of assessment, then maybe we can do away with certain issues. Okay, so we give tests, no? We can give tests. I give tests, no? There are some of my students here in electromagnetic theory. They know that I give tests, and I will show you some examples of how I give tests in the new normal later on. Okay, now, syempre, pag assessment, pwedeng formative, pwedeng summative, no? Hindi mo to pwedeng alisin, no? It will always be the case in terms of assessment. Now, let's talk about formative. In terms of the policy guidelines and the adapted orders and the resource book, they talk about formative assessment as this. If you notice, It says here that it is a process that involves teachers, okay, using evidence about what learners know and can do to inform and improve their teaching. So the first statement ay para sa guro. Okay, so the purpose here is for the teacher. Okay, then this process through the teacher's immediate feedback enables the student to take responsibility of their own learning and identify areas where they do well and where they need help. So napansin nyo, papunta sa estudyante pero dumaan pa rin sa teacher. So this definition highlights the role of the teacher in formative assessment. So ibig sabihin, hindi siya magsusolong assess lang, kailangan nandun si teacher para tulungan siya mag-assess. Okay. Now, in another definition, okay, in this site, which is reimagining or revising the definition of formative assessment. I really like this. It says here that formative assessment is a planned, ongoing process by all students and teachers. So you see, there's a sharing of the roles during teaching and learning. So that's the first part, no? It's a planned, ongoing process. So you don't just do it while you're teaching, no? You plan it, no? That's why planning for teaching and learning experience is very important, especially in the time of the pandemic. Number two, the purpose. Why? Because you want to elicit and use evidence of student learning for what? To improve understanding. Diba? Napakaganda nun, ano? And finally, to support students to become self-directed learners. I like the last part, self-directed learners. We need our learners now to become self-directed. Meaning, hindi na to yung mga batang sinusubuan mo ng bawat konsepto, no, na ito po ang definition ng ganito, yung mga ganon. So we now want them to become more self-directed. And if they become more self-directed, they will look at your self-learning modules with utmost engagement, and they will really learn and take time to learn from these. Okay? So, the effective formative assessment, what does it look like? No, what does it look like? Okay. Number one, clarifying learning goals and success criteria within a broader progression of learning. These are practices that will actually, eventually show or reflect effective formative assessments. So, dapat alam ng bata bakit kailangan niya gawin yung activity. Bakit ganun yung scoring, no? The criteria, the rubric, it has to be clarified with the students. So kaya 'di ba yung SLM nyo, if I remember correctly, there are initial parts which essentially focus on what will you learn in this particular module. Dapat basahin ng bata 'yon. Some kids don't read that. They go directly to the activities. Or some even go directly first to the keto correction. Okay. Number two, eliciting and analyzing evidence of student thinking. One beautiful thing that we teachers experience in the face-to-face is that we are able to observe how students' thinking become visible. Diba? Nagtanong ka, the nuisances, the body movements, the way they answer, they will make their thinking visible that way, the way they communicate and so on. And even the way they do their laboratories. Diba? We want to elicit and analyze these evidence of the way they think. Yun yung natatakot ako at nalulungkot ako na pag nag-focus lang tayo sa output, hindi na natin nakita yung proseso na pinagdaanan ng output. We do have to remember that the excellent output should also be equally, equally rated and equally appreciated as that excellent process the student went to create that output. Diba? Next, I think that would also include engaging in self-assessment and peer feedback. By the way, if I have my students here, they know that 10% of their grade is self-assessment. During the pandemic, I rehashed the course requirements, and 10% now is self-assessment. Now, my students assess their learning. And I'll be very honest, no one gives a 10. Wala pa akong estudyante nagbigay ng 10 sa self-assessment. I saw some very good students giving themselves 6, 7, and then they have to explain why. it's very important that the self-efficacy, as viewed by our learners, no, how learned they are in terms of the outputs, the outcomes, etc. Dapat alam din natin, di ba? uh, Assessment takes two sides. No, you look at the student, the output. The student looks at what he or she did also. No, so yun, very important. And of course, peer feedback. I remember doing this presentation with my students, and then they were giving peer feedback when they were reporting, and they were rating. It's a good way for them to share their thoughts, as well as for me also to see some parts I am missing out. Of course, there is a rubric that we all use and we all agreed to use in that particular activity. Next, to provide actionable feedback. Ano naman po yung actionable feedback, no? These are insightful feedback, no? When we are able to provide insightful feedback to our learners, apart from they are engaged more or you drive their interest, they become they establish this good relationship with the course or the subject. Nagugustuhan nila, no? Kahit hindi ka nila masyado nakikita, they are engaged because you are providing them feedback. When I talk of feedback, I remember one of my mentees in SDO Marikina, si Sir Bilien. He created a certain feedback mechanism for their school, and I would like to just say hi to, I think, parang National High School in Marikina for doing or embracing that idea of feedback. Okay? Especially in the SLMs. Napakaganda nun. Kasi even the parents would have to say something in terms of feedback. And then finally, using evidence and feedback to move learning forward. Ayan. Medyo mahirap minsan mag-move on. Ano? Mas mahirap mag-move forward. Ayan. We have to move learning forward. Nabanggit ko to kanina, no? Instructional decision. Okay? We can also adjust learning strategies, goals, or next instructional steps. I remember teaching in the time of the pandemic. Nung una, sobrang G na G, no? Sabi nga ng mga kabataan, G na G ako. Sa totoo lang. May online board work sila na synchronous and so on. Eventually, I realized kulang kami ng oras. Kulang kami ng oras. At hindi lahat ng oras dapat naka-online kami, nagsi-synchronous meeting or nagzo-Zoom or nag-Google Meet. So kulang talaga ng oras. So dapat mag-isip ka ng pamamaraan para ma-supplement yon. So I created instructional videos. We migrated our online board work in Facebook and in the LMS. Doon na lang sila nagko-comment. So ginawa namin ng paraan, no? Initially, our plans are beautiful in our eyes. And eventually, when we implement them, we'll see how we can better them. And like what I say in every talk that I give, everything that we do in education is an experiment. We do it better the next time. Now, these are some examples, no, that I usually use. For example, entry and exit slips, no? Kahit sa Zoom, no, may exit slip po sila. I'll show you some examples in a while. Practice drills and mastery quizzes. Of course, you know that some of these aren't graded. Activity sheets, engaging questions while you teach, and reflections. Hindi ko alam kung nandito yung mga estudyante ko na alumni ng PNU ng mga physics majors, that when I teach them, ayan, may nagkako. Hello, Sharon. Ayan. When I teach, alam nila that I ask a lot of questions. Right, Sharon? And oftentimes, ang tagal nila sumagot. Which I like also because they are processing. Okay? So, totoo po yun. Even yung patch nila, Charles, if he's around, I think Jennifer is here. Hi, Jennifer. You know, if I ask a question, right? And that question is not as simple as what is a magnetic field, no? That would have to go around different parts of the discussion. And I think asking engaging questions is a way to do formative assessment. Diba? Ang iba kasi when you say assessment, they just talk about exams, no? Quizzes. But we have multiple ways of doing that. And finally, what I like is reflections. You can ask them to write. No, oftentimes, akala mo naturo mo ng maganda yung lesson, then eventually you'll get someone will tell you, I didn't get it quite well because of these things. Especially online, marami ako nare-receive na feedback na, sorry po sir, yung towards the end, I was cut off because of the internet connectivity. Things like that. And reflections are very important as a way to inform our teaching. Okay? And Examples, I love this. It's called KWHLAQ. So it's like, for example, I ask my students these questions. Pero hinahati ko po yun, guys. So yung first three sa left, they do this before the class. So my students write, what do I know? What do I want to know? And how do I find out? And then this LAQ, they do this after the session or even a week after the session. Gusto ko lang i-highlight yung H. Kung napansin ninyo, yung H ay napakaganda. Bakit? Yung first two questions, ano yung alam na nila? Prerequisites, no? And then what yung gusto pa nilang matutunan? What else do they want to know? Why is H beautiful? Because it asks the students to take responsibility. Diba? Alam ko na po, sir, yung electric field. Alam ko na po yung ganito. Ano pa gusto ko malaman? Paano po kapag maraming charges, no? Collection of charges. Ngayon ang tanong, yun yung gusto mong malaman, paano mo kaya malalaman apart from listening to the lecture or the session? Diba? This one factors in self-directed learning. The last parts, I asked them to answer that after the class. Napakaganda na naman. Bakit? You see, there is a transition between learning and action, which is literacy and action. Tingnan nyo, natuto sila, pero ang tanong, after what they have learned, ano yung gagawin mo dahil natuto ka niyan? Very nice yung action. And finally, para ma-inform ako bilang guro, ano kaya yung iba pang tanong ng mga bata na hindi ko nasagot or hindi nasagot ng klase namin na baka pwede naming pag-usapan or pwede naming idaan sa ibang platform. Kasi hindi naman kailangan ikaw magturo lahat, di ba? Maraming pamamaraan of them getting their answers to these questions. Kaya lang, we have to guide them because of, there are a lot of disinformation and misinformation all around. Yan. So ayan, in-highlight ko na po yung pinapagawa ko prior to the session. Apart from that, my students love Jamboard. Okay, so when we do Jamboard, you can see there are 6 frames in this Jamboard. I ask them questions. No, this is something that I have learned in the pandemic. When you have a question, sa face-to-face kasi, pag nagtanong ka, di ba, may sasagot na a few people, tama? Although you throw the question to everybody, only a few people will answer. One thing I've realized during the time of the pandemic is for inclusion. You ask the question and that everybody who wants to answer can answer. So sometimes I give the Jamboard prior to the class and they can already see the questions. Then they just put their answers there using this sticky notes. And then we talk about this in class. Okay, I will not talk about definitions in class. I will talk about their answers. And if there are misconceptions, I'll gladly take over. So I think some people misconstrue the idea of the online class to be the same class you hold before, but only migrated to the laptop or the cell phone. It's not. You have to rethink which process of the 7 E's, for example, should you migrate. Okay? May mga pumapasok po. Hello sa inyo. Ayan. Nabanggit ko kanina, exams. Nagpapa-exam po ako. Yes, I give exams. They are not timed. When I say timed, hindi yung isang oras lang, tapos nagsasara, hindi. My exams are usually asynchronous for, let's say, a week or 1 day or so on. This one is a drill assessment from My Open Math. Teachers, kung meron kayong .edu account, you can create a My Open Math account. I would like to say thank you to Dr. Celine Sarmiento. She was the one who introduced me to My Open Math. And I love My Open Math. No? This one is a drill, meaning my students can try, retry and try again, no, to answer questions in this platform. May time yan, pero they can try again. And they can get help. This is not graded. But this is part of the course called Electromagnetic Theory 1. And before we start the course, we have this introduction, of course, and the pre-test, and of course, review of mathematical methods. Do I need to talk about that in a synchronous class? No. I give this to my students. You review on your own. I will go through the grade book, check how you're doing in terms of your drills. If ever I see something na laging paulit-ulit na mali, I'll talk about it. but essentially this is already the learning experience. You see, you learn in the assessment, no? So my students do this. By the way, I might have some students who will take LMAG. So ayan, nakita nyo na yung isang item dyan. So it's my open math. It's a beautiful platform, guys. And as you can see, they have many attempts to do it. Okay, now let's take a look at the next one. Okay, I'm not sure if I can play the video, but the next one is about predict, observe, explain, observe, explain, or PEOE. No, I love this, especially because it allows me to assess also. It would look as if para ka nagtuturo, no? But I'm also assessing at the same time. By the way, the video I'm going to show here was created by my student in PNU Master MA, si Miss Jovela Peñaojas, and I asked them to create hook videos. Now, in this idea, you ask the students to predict what will happen. You know, science is about conceptual change, changing beliefs, no? Kasi ang bata may alam, no? May alam ang bata. Pero yung alam niya pwedeng partially correct, pwedeng tamang-tama, pwedeng kulang, and so on and so forth. So, I will show you first the hook video. I hope it will play, ha? Narinig niyo po ba yon? Ma'am Janice, okay
Yes,
ba yan?
yes, sir.
Sige. Isa-stop ko, ha, para mapag-discuss natin.
Hello! How are you doing? Today, we'll be having a simple experiment. So simple that we only need two materials, nails and a balloon. Here we have a bed of nails, and in here, a single nail, and of course, an inflated balloon. I will lightly press this balloon on top of the bed of nails. What do you think will happen? 5 seconds to think. 1, 2.
See? Sabi niya, ito gagawin ko, pero tinanong niya, what will happen? Mag-isip muna kayo bago natin tingnan. Napakaganda, no? It's a way to assess also what your students already know. Let's continue.
3, 4, 5. Is that what you think will happen?
Tingnan nyo, may confirmation and affirmation. Tinanong niya, yun ba yung inisip mo? Kasi baka hindi ito yung nangyari. Di ba? So very important, you are allowing them to learn from the process at the same time, na-assess nila yung sarili nila. Di ba? Sige, pagpatuloy natin. Maiksi lang po ito.
I will lightly press the same balloon on top of the single nail. What do you think will happen? 5 seconds to think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that the same as what you think will happen?
So yan, dito sa part na to, nag-discuss na siya. Okay? So my students in SciEd 701 created a lot of these videos. I cannot show all of them right now, no, because we are timed. But I am very proud, no, to show you these outputs of my students. And kung papanoorin ito ng bata, napakaiksi, no? I'm not sure kung napansin niyo, 2 minutes lang siya. Pero yung learning ay significant kasi it allows the child to see patterns and correct misconceptions along the way. So I think we have to focus on these things, no? These are very important things where we use our teaching not only to teach but also to assess them and them to assess themselves. Diba? So I think that's very important to take note of. Okay? So salamat kay Miss Jovela, no? Actually, marami akong videos na ganito and I'm very proud to say ang gagaling gumawa ng mga estudyante natin. Oh, ayan, wait lang. Paano ko ba i-move forward na ito? Ayan.
Next.
Ayan. Ayun.
Yeah.
So apart from that, nabanggit ko na I have online board work. So my students, syempre po guys, pag mga math related yung courses, di ba? May online board work, nagsasagot yung mga bata. If you remember it right, nung face-to-face, tayo, nagsasagot tayo sa board, no? Pero we cannot do that, no, all together. Pero what did we do? We do it in platforms. For example, we did this in Facebook before during the first term. So if you can see, they already have a copy of all the questions. By the way, I don't give surprise exams or something. All of the questions, the problem sets are already given in the start of the course. So ayan, alam na po nila, no? And they are uploading here videos of how they solve that particular question or problem. Okay? So ito po, hindi ko po, binlur ko na lang po yung name, pero I'm very thankful for their, responses. So you see, I have 28 students. They're able to see this. In some other photos, they respond and ask questions. And I really like that because when they ask, they are doing interaction, no? And this help in the assessment of that student. Assess niya, tama ba yung sinabi ko or sinulat ko? Dito nakikita nyo, it's not only my responsibility to check. It's also the student's responsibility to check the others' outputs. Diba? So, thank you guys for letting me show this clips. Naka-close group po kami guys sa Facebook. So, hindi nyo po mahanap itong mga classroom namin. Okay. And I like self-evaluation and progress reports. Ito po, for example, in one course I taught during the start of the pandemic, it's called Math Methods in Science or Mathematical Methods in Science. They are required to have this progress report every after lesson. Kung napansin nyo po, they will just click the section and then they'll click the lesson if it's lesson 1, lesson 2, or so on. And there are a few questions. Ito po yung mga, I just clipped the Google form. Ito po yung una, please rate your level of effort in the lesson. Effort muna, no? Diba? And I will tell you, my students are very honest. I can see that wala ka talaga makikitang bata magsasagot ng mas matataas. Usually, no? Usually, may middle, may one point lower, mga ganon, no? And then they will be explaining. Some of my students even say, kasi po hindi po ako masyado nakaka-attend ng online na sessions. So they are able to assess, no? I even contact my students and tell them, bakit bumaba yung score mo sa asynchronous exam 3? And they will explain, no? They will say, sorry po sir, minadali ko yung exam. Yung mga ganon, these are ways to assess, no? Wag nating kalimutan yung power ng self-assessment. Okay, let's now go to summative assessment kasi gustong-gusto natin yung summative assessment, no? Noong mga unang panahon, no, ito yung mga katumbas ng ating mga written and performance tasks, even quarterly exams, naalala niyo nung high school pa tayo guys, yung mga periodical test, no? And even yung mga ewan ko kung merong mga exit exams ang school ninyo, parang gano'n, para i-promote kayo to the next level, mga gano'n. Pero here, we focus on the written and the performance tasks. So ano ang sinasabi ng policy guidelines sa summative assessment? So these are assessments usually administered towards the end. No, pagpatapos na. No, patapos na lang ang term or ang klase, papahirap ka muna bago ka matapos. Meron ka muna ng exam, di ba? And it measures the extent of which the learners have mastered the essential learning competencies, and the results are recorded and are used to report. Ito na yung may card, no? Kung 97 ka sa math, mga ganyan. Ito na, this form part of that. Okay? So, di ba nung mga bata tayo, after na pag na-release yung card, tanungan, nakailan ka sa ganito? Di ba yung ganun mga bata? And we often compare because we think that these grades really do matter. And they do, no? They do in the context of our society now. Pero, pag-isipan din natin, pag-isipan din natin ang new normal and post-COVID world, no? Okay. Ngayon, sabi sa policy, to evaluate student learning at particular points in each quarter, summative assessment shall continue. Take note, but in the form of written works and performance tasks. And if you read through the other documents, they forgo the delivery or having or administering quarterly exams. Hindi na sila nag-periodical exam. Okay? So, pag-usapan natin yung dalawa, yung written works and performance tasks. So first, written works. What are these? These are quizzes, long exams, similar forms distributed across cognitive process dimension. Ang social nun, cognitive process dimensions. So sabi niyo po, sir, mahirap magpa-quiz, magpa-long exam. Bakit sinasabi pa rin natin to? Ibig sabihin, mag-iisip po tayo ng paraan. Okay, before I go to that, ang sabi doon, pag nagpa-exam ka, you distribute it across the cognitive process dimensions. Of course, we are all familiar with the revised Bloom's taxonomy, which now looks into, remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and to create. No, these are now the taxonomy of the words that we use to create our objectives. At the same time, inspire and aligns us to create assessments and activities. Ayun. So ibig sabihin, pag nagpa-exam ako, puro lang ba remember? remembering. Dapat hindi, di ba? Dapat may understanding, may analyzing, and so on and so forth. So you distribute across the cognitive process dimensions. And challenge. Challenge natin sa sarili natin. Wag lang cognitive process dimensions. Let's also align this with what we refer to as knowledge dimensions. These are factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive dimensions. So, I love this article from the Iowa State University on how they actually interface the cognitive process dimensions with the knowledge dimension. Tingnan nyo, kunwari sa remember, yung exam ko pang remember, pero gusto ko metacognitive, it's now identify. The questions will be on the identify set. If I want them to apply and I would want to go to procedural, I want them to carry out procedures or processes. So it's actually a good guide. No? It's actually a good guide and a good opportunity for teachers to review. Hindi lang basta gumawa ka ng exam. No? Remember, we have to distribute across cognitive process dimensions. And my challenge to everybody to include knowledge dimensions. Okay. Paano po si Sir magpa-exam? Ayan. Paano po ako magpa-exam? Yung mga estudyante ko dito sa nung new normal, naka-experience po sila nito. This is, in my open math, a chapter test. It's an asynchronous test. If you will ask me, do I fear that they are cheating or they will be cheating? No. Why? Okay, I will give you my answer. First, nakikita nyo po ito, no? May parang arrow na may 3, meaning they can have 3 tries. Okay, they have 3 tries to answer. Nakikita niyo po itong 19? Anong ibig sabihin po ng 19? There are 19 versions of this question. Ibig sabihin, kunwari ako nag-take ngayong araw, si Ma'am Janice mamayang gabi, malamang magkaiba kami na makikitang tanong with the same competency. Naunawaan niyo po yun, no? Parallel yung questions, pero iba yung makikita niyang tanong. Kaya ako tanong ko siya, Ma'am Janice, ano sagot mo sa number 1? Pag sinabi niyang F equals ganito, sabi ko, bakit parang iba yung sagot ko? Kasi magkaiba nga kami ng tanong. O yan na, yung mga estudyante ko na nandito, alam nyo na. Nasabi ko na. Oops, sorry. Ayan. So ganun po yun. And it's very beautiful. Why? If I check how my students took the exam, I will know if nakailan silang tries. I like the idea of trying. You know, in my class, it's okay if you don't get the right answer in the first time. But I respect that you try again. Mas mahalaga sa akin yun. Because that's what we need in this time. Our students na, you know, fighting to learn, mas mahalaga yun for me. Now, by the way, ano to, student view ba to? Opo, student view siya, so hindi mo makikita yung sagot.
Pero pag sorry, may I interrupt? Yeah. Curious lang ako. Ano itong My Open Math, itong program na to?
It's a platform.
Platform sa university nyo or
No, it's an online it's free access actually. If you're a faculty, if you're a faculty and you have a .edu account, you can request for a faculty account.
Sa My Open Math.
Yes, but you have to prove that you are a faculty kasi they will not give you a faculty account if you're not a faculty.
Ganda to, sir.
Yes, sa totoo lang, napakaganda po nito. Not only in physics, math, chemistry, astronomy,
may iba pa siya.
Business. So, lahat na math related. Ayan, so chinika ko na sa inyo guys.
Chika na ako. Q&A na ba?
Oo, pero that's a good point.
Kasi maganda ma-emphasize itong part na to, sir.
Kasi ma'am, I'd like to emphasize why I talked about it because they will all often ask, paano mo nalalaman kung nagkopyahan sila? I try to give these checkpoints and I try to place security nets along the way. Kasi apart from that, I would like to remind teachers. So from the start, no, I tell my students na mahirap yung time ng pandemic and I would really appreciate them trying. To be honest, well, so far, wala pa estudyante na nahuling ng diet nung time ng pandemic. Wala pa ako nahuli. Ako meron man, wala pa ako nahuli. Pero it's because when I check their outputs, most of these outputs are really individualized. Hindi naman kasi talaga makakapagkopyahan ang mga bata sa aking mga exams. Okay? So isa pang example, ma'am. Sa DC circuits, this is I think chapter test 5, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Dito po isang tanong, may isang STEM, may 3 tanong. Meron po sila ulit 3 tries to answer and there are 19 versions of this question. Ano ibig sabihin ko po? Nakikita niyo po yung circuit? Hindi po yun makikita ni Ma'am Janice na laging 16 ohms. Mag-iiba-iba po yung question na yan.
Ito, randomly generated na siya nito.
Yes.
Oh, ang galing.
And you can even contribute your questions here. Diba? So, ang ganda kasi, sa totoo lang, ang mga estudyante ko nasa shock sila, bakit iba yung tanong sa number 5, yung mga ganon, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay? And of course, I often use also Google Forms. Like this one. This is a final exam that I give. By the way, nabanggit ko kanina no, sa DepEd, usually wala silang quarterly exams, only performance tasks. Sa amin, we can still have final exams or final outputs. So sa higher ed, no? So dito po baka maisip nyo, baka magkopyahan na sila dito kasi Google Form po ito. More often than not, hindi rin po. Kasi meron po itong submission of meron po siyang submission of a template of their solutions. So I also check that. So and they're I think given 1 day to do this if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Do I allow them to make problem sets? Yes. Some teachers will ask me, "Sir, di ba may available online na mga solutions? Di ba yung mga sagot? Solutions manual, di ba na-download siya?" Yes, there are. My point of having problem sets is not for them to just to learn the solution, no? My idea is for them to have that muscle memory. Yung pag nabasa mo ang tanong, inisip mo, kahit kumopya ka ng solution doon sa manual, may learning pa rin doon. And hindi ko pinapakopya ang solutions manual because may template. Kung napansin niyo po, ito po ang template ng aming problem set. And this is one problem set by one of my good students. And if you notice, meron po siyang side physics concepts and math concepts na dapat alam mo para masagutan mo yung tanong. These are not parts of the solutions manual of textbooks. Okay, and if you notice, these are handwritten. Handwritten po talaga to lahat. And they need to submit. Kung napansin nyo may isang part, explain why you think the answer is correct. Kasi di ba malalaman nila kung ano yung sagot pag na-Google nila yung question? Pero ang tanong ko, paano mo nalaman na tama yung sagot? Then my students will explain. And I even try to check this in an online session. I even try to ask them, okay, Miss Janice, sagot mo doon ay 5 meters. Sabi mo, tama yun, pero bakit nakuha mo yung 5, hindi nakuha mo 25? Mga ganon, ano? These are important things where you are able to assess if they're doing their job as learners. Okay. Let's ipapatuloy natin, ano? So, dito naman kanina written work, ngayon performance task. Ito yung mas mahalaga para sa akin. Ito yung nakikita ko mas mahalaga. So, these are ways for our students to create, innovate products or do performance-based tasks like skill demos, presentations, oral work and research projects. Di ba? Walang exam pero may gagawin, no? Which actually show the achievement of learning competencies and of course, harmonization of these competencies. Isang ginawa ng estudyante ko, I asked them to observe the moon on certain periods of time, hindi po araw-araw, no, but on certain periods of time. And these are photos taken by my students and there are guide questions for them to answer. So these are a form of activity as well as assessment. Ayan, ito po paborito ko. When I gave a talk before sa DepEd Bicol for their senior high school training, I told them that you can do this activity when you talk about forces, for example. So you try to make paper airplanes. Sa bahay, people can make paper airplanes and you can ask your students to try to design, no, the paper airplanes. So may physics ba doon? Oo naman. So, napasok yung idea ng tinatawag natin ng, design thinking and even engineering design of asking our learners to think, no? Hindi nakagawa ka ng eroplano, so can you innovate it? That's part of the learning process and that's part of the assessment process. Can they write about it? Yes. They can write about it. They can submit a write-up of what they did as a procedure. Diba? They can document, they can create a vlog of what they did. Diba? There are many forms of what they can submit to you. But at the end of the day, you can ask them, what did you learn? Which paper airplane was better? Diba? These factors in a lot of things, including engineering concepts, di ba? Even math concepts, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, in the elementary, no, let's make science fun, no? Like for example, when you're teaching processes, scientific processes to young learners, why not ask them to prepare food? 'Di ba? Jam making is a preservation technique, but there's a lot of science in this, no? There's a lot of thermodynamics concepts in this. Eventually, it's delicious, pero you learn, you know that you've learned something, 'di ba? Ang bata malalaman niya, bakit kaya siya nagiging effective preservation technique, 'di ba? You can even ask them to write about it. And this is what my point is, no? Let us exhaust the capacity of our house. 'Di ba? Let's exhaust the capacity of our homes to learn science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You know, you can go to your kitchen, you can do a lot of things in your kitchen. And of course, these are some advanced things that our learners can do. Of course, they need some other materials like yung mga batteries and so on. It was hard for me to teach LMAG 2 because there's a laboratory component and we were distant, no? Remote kami. So, ang hirap. I cannot see my learners how they check how they use the multi-tester. Nung face-to-face, I would really meticulously check what they're doing kasi natatakot ako na baka may maaksidente. Pero ngayon natatakot din ako kasi di ko sila masyado nakikita. Pero before I approve the experiment, I check the proposal, the plan for the experiment, which includes safety precautions. And there are videos na nakikita namin yung ginagawa nila. So I think for now, we have to settle with that, no? Yung observation part nung ginagawa, nakikita ko sa pamamagitan ng video. Do I rate that? Yes. Okay, in our Google folders, Drive folders, there are a lot of experiments that my students did in the time of the pandemic. If you notice, there are videos which will serve as performance tasks, verification of these tasks, and of course, experiment reports. This time, I gave them a template. In the face-to-face, I did not give a template for the I didn't give a very strict template for the experiments. So I will not play the videos, but there are a lot, and I appreciate what my students did in this very short videos. Sorry, guys, these are very short, like 2 to 5 minutes videos of experiments they did in their houses. Okay. Of course, when you talk about performance-based assessments, we cannot shy away or distance ourselves from project and problem-based learning, di ba? Naririnig natin lagi yan eh. When we talk about STEM education, we will talk about problem and project-based learning, right? So, if you notice, yung naka-red, why did I play this in red? Because they are much related to our talk today. So, PBL serves as formative, performance-based, and authentic forms of evaluations. And they allow for co-assessing of learning. Okay, very important. These are my students' PBL outputs. In one course, there is a requirement of a final output, and that's a PBL project. And this one is also the presentations of my students for biophysics. These are also PBL outputs. There's no final exam, but there is a final output. And they discussed that to the class, and they shared the videos over our platforms. So nakakatuwa. Why? We're learning electricity and magnetism, but can we take it one notch higher? Can my students do a device or create a device because of what they've learned in electricity? Di ba mas mahalaga yun sa panahon ngayon that there are frequent brownouts, di ba? That there's a crisis and so on. We want our learners to solve problems. Pag graduate yan ng science major, pag tinanong mo pag may problema sa society, the definition of the electric field will not solve it. But how you use that definition to create something, diba, to think of a solution will solve that problem. I think that's how we should recalibrate and refocus the way we teach and the way we assess. Apart from, ang dami po, no, thank you to my students. These are their outputs. These are plans of my STS students to talk about integration of IT and AI in development of solutions to inherent problems in the society. So in my classes, in our classes at PNU, we already asked our learners, what are the problems in the society that you think we can solve using what you learned? in our course. Di ba napakaganda nun? In basic ed, if you go to senior high school, you have 2 researches and 1 capstone, di ba? So these are ways to drive our learners to create. And sometimes, let me just say this, no? Sometimes it becomes too stringent. That's why they are not forced to create. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we are too concerned about the format of what they write. That's why they shy away from the research. Maybe we can focus on the ideation and the creation. Maybe we just supplement further the writing. Sometimes natatakot sila kasi hindi nila ma-move forward yung sa sulat. Okay? In one course, guys, share ko lang din sa ano ba tong course? Electromagnetic Theory 2. This is my final exam. This is my final output. Their final output. Ano po yun? My students created a video of themselves deriving the speed of light in a vacuum, considering Maxwell's equations. I cannot feel, I'm so proud of my students to be able to do these derivations. This is a performance-based task. They cannot do this if they did not learn. Diba? They cannot do that if they did not learn. So they planned for their presentation. You can see this one, this student writing on a board in this video. This one prepared a beautiful slide deck, diba? Which I don't find in other textbooks. Diba? Yung idea pa lang na gumawa sa video and all the technology skills that came with that, nakakatuwa na po ang mga bata. Another one, ginawa po ng isang master student. We did this in Jamboard. If you noticed, bakit naka-Jamboard? Kasi po nagpa-present po ako sa kanila. They did all of their presentations in Jamboard and in Zoom. So ayan po. Some people might say, bakit hindi ka po sir nag-simulations? Meron din po. Pero I would like to remind you po, teachers, when you create when you use simulations, please create an activity sheet contextualized to your class. So I created this one, and I shared this with some PNU faculty. So pinapasagutan ko to sa mga bata. And if you notice, guys, yung mga first parts is always done for them. Kahit, kung napansin nyo, ito din, the first part, ginawa ko na for them. Bakit? Lalo na sa basic ed, important po yun. Diba? Binigay mo yung instruction, ibigay mo rin yung first part sa kanila. Bakit? Kasi, diba nung face-to-face, ang daming tanong ng mga bata. Diba? Nagbigay ka na ng instruction. Pagkatapos, tatanungin ka nila, uulitin mo na naman yung instruction. So, maganda magbigay ka ng halimbawa. Yun. Now, nabanggit ko kanina, I've mentioned that we don't have quarterly exams, but the time that you use for exams can be used for their presentations of their performance tasks, which essentially show how the performance standards in the CGs are actually manifested in our students as outcomes. Pakita ko lang, I'll just scan through some. Ito po, number 1, conduct a survey to assess the possible geologic hazards your community may experience. Dito sa Earth and Life ng grade 11 or 12. Diba? Actually, dalawa yan na magkatulad pagdating sa papuntang lesson 10, hydrometeorological hazards naman. So, pwede ba itong gawin ng bata kahit naka-community quarantine? Pwede. Pwede namang di sila lumabas ng bahay. Pwede silang gumamit ng hazard hunter. Pwede silang gumamit ng Google Earth. Pakita ko to guys Hazard Hunter PH, for example, nilocate ko po ang Manila City Hall. Ayan, sa Hazard Hunter, ito po yun. Ngayon, pag kinlik mo po ito ang kinlik ko po yung hydrometeorological hazard kasi wala naman pong volcanic hazard dito sa for now, no? So kinlik ko po yung flood, ayan po, at ito po yung lumabas. Yung mas dark color po, ibig sabihin mas po siya, no? Mas may risk sa flooding. Tapos ito po yung lumabas, no, sabi ng MGB, no, susceptibility po ng areas na to for flooding, moderate susceptibility. Nakabigay naman po na more or less 1 meter na flood, ganyan. So, ibig sabihin, pwedeng gamitin to ng bata, type lang nila yung location nila, ma-assess nila or masasurvey nila yung hazards sa place nila. And you can even ask them to plan mitigation or DRRM measures, di ba? You can even ask them to create a presentation to their barangay captain, no? Talking about the risks, for example, for geohazards and of course for hydrometeo hazards. Sa Bicol, we experience all, di ba? All the hazards. Tagbagyo tayo, no? Ang bulkan, and so on and so forth. So we are very resilient in all of these hazards. So dapat ba alam natin to? Yes. Yes, we have to. 'Di ba? Yun, no? Okay, hindi ko na di-discuss yung iba, guys, no? So, pero pinapakita ko yung mga halimbawa, no? So, eto, papunta na ako sa last part ng talk. Mahalaga yung rubric, no? Kasi performance activity siya. Hindi pwedeng nag-perform yung bata, okay 10, okay 97. The child should know why, no? Why? You often need to tell them the rubric before they do the activity, no? They have to know how they will be assessed. That is just right. In my classes often, I introduce the rubric so that they can give me a comment. Sir, parang gusto na yung bawasan yung ganitong indicator, gawin na lang natin ganito. They participate in that. I even ask them, okay lang ba sa inyo self-assessment is 10%? I even ask them that. That has to be part of what you talk about in class because that is a learning contract. Diba? When you introduce the course, you are creating a contract with your learners. No? So these are rubrics, holistic, analytical, and then these are sample rubrics for investigations. Okay? Mahalaga na ma-force natin ang mga bata, no, na maintindihan nila na they need to investigate, innovate, and create, no? Writing good hypotheses, good problems, going through processes, and so on. Of course, the paper that they submit becomes something that we need to rate or grade, no? Ito, example na ginagamit po namin for problem-based or project-based learning activities. So there are criteria and there's the description. Pag napasok sa description, automatic 4, and so on. And I would like to highlight, you notice that we have these formative and summative learning experiences, no, or strategies. And I think we cannot say na hindi important yung summative, no? It's also very important, but during the time of the pandemic, we have to really beef up, no, on this formative forms of assessment because it's really hard, no? Mahirap yung sitwasyon, no? They really need to know that they're doing good, they're not doing very well, where do they need to, improve, and so on, such that there is a shift to what we refer to as assessment for learning or for that formative concept of assessment. Okay, if you notice, there are fewer exams, but more doing, no? More actions, more performance, more research, and so on. Now, I'm almost to the end, no, of this presentation, guys. Thank you for sticking around. Now, for me, the best assessment is 3 things. Number 1, it is a reflection of your goals. What do you want them to learn? So the assessment should reflect that. If you want them to derive the speed of light, then create an assessment that they will be able to show that. It is a combination of various types. There are a lot of ways to assess. I've mentioned some of them. Those are not they may not be the best, no, but these are some examples. I know you can have a host of a lot of things that you can share. And finally, contextualize. We have to contextualize assessments because, like what I said, teaching and learning nowadays is a case-to-case basis. Some of my learners are are not always active in the synchronous sessions because of internet issues and so on and so forth. Now, ways forward. Anong gusto kong sabihin? Number 1, assessment for learning. Gamitin natin ang assessment para matuto. Mas mahalaga yon. Pangalawa, inclusive and diverse forms of assessment. Hindi lahat ng bata pare-parehas ng sitwasyon, pinagdadaanan. Di ba, like in the Esta framework, our learners are diverse. Culturally, in language, in geopolitics, and so on and so forth. Even economy. So their capacities and affordances also differ. No? Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, di ba, pag nagtanong ka sa klase, you have to be sure everyone can answer. Meaning, has the capacity to answer. Okay? Hindi yung mag-identify ka na lang. Flexibility in assessment. Let's be more flexible this time. Self and peer, di ba? Di ba ang saya pag sinabi ko na inassess ko yung sarili ko, ay 8 lang po ako overnight, pero inassess ako ni sir na perfect. Yung mga ganon, bakit kaya ni sir inassess na perfect yung output ko? Tapos bakit kaya ako nag-assess lang na mas mababa? It's actually allowing the learners to think. Performance-based, guys. More performance-based, no? Kung sinabi mo gusto mo silang magsulat ng tula, o di magsulat ng tula. Kung sinabi mo gusto mo silang magtula or tumula, di dapat tumutula sila, 'di ba? The performance is very important. And eto last na, integrative forms of assessment. Napakarami at napakakapal minsan ng mga ginagawa ng mga bata. Baka pwede naman tayo mag-usap-usap na baka yung assessment natin pwede nating i-harmonize. Sa PNU, for example, yung course na tinuturo naming Science, Technology, and Society, kina-harmonize namin sa purposive communication. Kaya yung isang requirement on writing a position paper on climate change, na-submit ng bata hindi lang sa isang subject, sa dalawang subject. Diba? Diba ang ganda nun? Nakabawas sa trabaho ng bata. Kasi parehas lang naman ang gusto kayong mangyari. Ako, I want to know the position of that child as to climate change. The English teacher would like to know kung paano siya magsulat, di ba? So, maybe we can have integrative forms of assessment. I know integrative forms of assessment would merit another talk, no? Napakalaki din itong pag-uusap, no? Pero baka pwede naman tayo mag-usap-usap. Hindi porket maraming tinuro, maraming inassess, maganda yung teaching and learning, dapat appropriate and essential. Okay? Tanungin ko lang bago ako matapos. I want all of our teachers to reflect. With all things that we did already and we are doing, do you think we are learner-centered? Kasi that is what we front. We are always saying we are learner-centered. Are we really learner-centered, or are we concerned more on the content? Mas mahalaga ba yung natututunan o yung tinuturo? Alin yung mas mahalaga? Pag-isipan po natin mga guro. Pero bago ako matapos, I have a request. Kasi yung FilSciHub, may advocacy sila, di ba, on STEAM and STEM education. May request po ako sa inyo because we are part of STEM education. Please tell your learners that they can be STEM professionals and STEM teachers. Please tell them that they can be one of us. Okay? So that we can better the quality of STEM education in the Philippines and we can increase the number of STEM professionals in the Philippines. And invitation, plug ko lang po, please join us at PNU, the 3rd National Conference on STEM STEM education. Guys, hanapin nyo na lang po ito sa Facebook. Free po ito, guys. So join po kayo dyan. And salamat po sa PNU, sa FUSE, at sa FilSciHub. Sabi nga namin sa Bicol, just mabalus po. Thank you very much. If you have questions, you can message me via LinkedIn or even in Instagram. Thank you.
Ayan, maraming salamat sir sa iyong napaka-lively na at saka info-packed na discussion para sa amin. So ayun, very happy kami. Ang dami na natutunan sa inyo sir. So, tsaka gusto ko yung nagpa-participate yung mga students mo habang pag may mga tanong ka sa Zoom kanina. So, halatang-halata talaga na napaka you're a very effective teacher, sir. Kanina nga may mga comment pa kami sa group chat namin sa FilSciHub na parang sana ito naging teacher namin to si Sir sa physics. Ganyan. Kasi ayun, na-appreciate namin yung pagtuturo niya, sir. And so I'd like to make some comments also muna bago tayo dumako sa Q&A. So pagpahingahin ka muna namin, sir. So ayan, so what I like the most about your talk, sir, is that you made sure to point out that assessment should be focused on learning of the students and not just branding branding them like mahina or magaling, especially at this difficult time of pandemic. Hindi lang yung pagalingan sa pag-memorize ng concepts, kundi kailangan naiintindihan talaga. At saka kahit pagbalik-balik ta rin pa yung tanong, kaya nilang i-analyze ang concept kasi talagang na-internalize ng learners yung tutunan nila. And another realization that I have from listening to you, sir, is informative assessment strategies na nalista ninyo kanina. Most often our learners stop at this stage, which is what have I learned? And they do not think further. So I think especially right now na online learning lang tayo and we have limited resources, it's very important to emphasize the next steps. Yung what action will I take after learning something and what questions do I have? That's very important. And I think dito nga sa last na part na nabanggit nyo is in-apply nyo siya. Parang may iniwan kayong tanong sa amin. And yun, very important na after mo may matutunan ka, magtatanong ka din eventually. And we also need to really encourage critical thinking sa ating mga estudyante. Yun. So, dumako naman tayo sa, may mga reminders pala muna ang ating FilSciHub founder and CEO. Kuya Jeff? Kuya Jeff, naka-mute ka po.
Diba? Gabi na po. Anyways, Sir Alfons, thank you so much. Talagang punong-puno. So kami, nila Janice, we were chatting on sa background kanina. Sabi namin, naku, siguro kung si Sir yung naging teacher namin, baka naintindihan ko yung physics nung high school. Pero,
nagturo si Sir sa high school ko.
Ay, ganun ba?
Pero hindi ko siya naging estudyante. Hindi ko siya naging estudyante.
Pero I think kung naging teacher kita, mas na-appreciate ko pa lalo ang physics.
Yeah, and ako, just to add to what Janice had emphasized, no, yung last part, yung application side. You have to leverage the things. You have to encourage your students to leverage the things that they learned inside the classroom to create something of value. And yan po talaga yung sobrang kulang sa atin sa Pilipinas. Marami po kaming mga programang gustong i-roll out soon with the support of even the Philippine business sector. Kasi ang dami pong mga small industries po that are up and coming ngayon sa Pilipinas, but then yung challenge po is wala po talaga tayong talent. Wala po tayong masyadong local talent. And ang konsepto po ng mga tao kapag nag-aral po sila ng ang STEM at nagpakadalubhasa po sila sa, for example, sa level ng masters or ng PhD, ang thinking po ng mga tao sa atin sa Pilipinas ay magiging professor ka, magtuturo ka. So yung real life application po ng mga tinuturo nyo sa high school or sa elementarya, hopefully po may inspire nyo sila that you can be scientists gaya nga ni Sir, or you can be STEM educators. Kaparehas nila ng mga kasamahan natin sa PNU. But anyways, so speaking of pag-inspire sa mga tao na mag-apply ng kanilang learnings sa STEM, hopefully through research, no? So ito pong buwan ng October, we will be delivering to you yung second installment ng webinar series that De La Salle University's Central Instrumentation Facility had prepared for high school and college level researchers. So ito po para sa mga guro at sa mga estudyante. So ang atin pong scope dito ay mga modern analytical method. So yung sa inyo po sa high school level, kung meron kayong research projects at nag-iisip kayo, ano ba yung mga analytical techniques na pwedeng i-employ para makagather kayo ng data? Ito po yun. So, just last week, September 25th, we had Mr. Chris Argamino talking about atomic and molecular spectroscopy for environmental application. So, yun naman pong session ni Sir Chris ay naka-upload sa aming YouTube channel. So, if you would like to check that out, nandun po yun. And then, next week, on October 9th, we will have Dr. Jose Esmiria from De La Salle's CIF as well. He will deliver the second lecture titled Fundamentals of Scanning Electron Microscopy. So yung scanning electron microscopy or SEM, napakalawak po ng applications yan. Chemistry, physics, biology, and all. So this is something that is worth checking out. And one very important aspect of all these webinars is that we are offering these for free. So ito pong mga gantong klase ng courses, usually magbabayad po kayo ng libo-libo. So attend po kayo dito, pa-attendan nyo po yung mga estudyante nyo para maging familiar sila. And so this is a 5 installment series po, no? So in November, on November 27th in particular, Dr. Virgilio Ebajo Jr. Will talk about nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy for natural products research. So ito po, hindi lang po ito introduction sa analytical technique, meron pong research applications lahat ng episodes dito. December 4th, we have Mr. Michael Arnante. He'll talk about multi-species cytogenetic analysis or cytogenic. I don't know which one is the right one. And then last installment, but not the least, is to be delivered by a very good friend of ours and also part of FilSciHub's leadership team, Dr. Anna Karen Lacerna. So she will talk about liquid chromatography, specifically instrumentation and applications in natural products research. So ito po, if you would like to learn more about how to register to all these events, nandun punta po kayo dun sa aming website, www.filscihub.com, and also sa amin pong Facebook page, official Facebook page. So punta po kayo dun. Okay, so gaya po na lagi namin sinasabi, pinupuno po namin ang inyong kalendaryo. Wala po kaming Sabadong pinalalagpas. So, and actually, Sir Alfons, itong episode mo ngayon is our 52nd webinar, 52nd web event. So, technically, isang buong taon na ng webinars po ang aming naihindog sa inyo. So, this is a milestone event. So, I would just like to give a shout out to my team, for all the hard work. Kasi for the past 16 months, halos isang buong taon, 52 weeks na po ang aming web events. And then we would like to thank all of the speakers, including, Sir Alfons and everyone from PNU. Okay, October 16th, we have Dr. Ted Novitsky from PPG Industry. So PPG is one of the world's biggest oil and paints companies. And so ito pong si Dr. Ted or si Dr. Ted Novitsky, he is one of the world experts when it comes to formulation of paints and coatings. And what he'll do is that he'll give you a sneak peek about his career as an expert in this area, and also mag-share siya ng technical aspects ng paints and coatings, and partly career guidance na rin to. So check this out. October 23rd, we will have Dr. Neil Ergarguin from Institute of Mathematical Sciences and Physics from UPLB. This is our very first mathematics-oriented webinar. And they'll talk about maths in action, controlling sound and electromagnetic waves. So, Sir Alfons, attend ka, yung mga taga-physics dito, no? So, ayan, and so for 2022, we will also have our webinar series sa math po and applications of it. So watch out for that. Kulang po siguro ang 52 na Saturdays. So anyway, and last but not least, I mentioned earlier, last installment ng FUSE-PNU and FilSciHub training course will be delivered to you by Dr. Analet Carrasco from Houston, and also by Mr. JP Onya, FilSciHub Research University's head, and he's based in Finland. And they'll introduce, or magbibigay sila ng crash course sa mga teachers on the fundamentals of research. So, yan po yung mga events natin so far. So, register lang po tayo dun sa ating official website at saka sa ating Facebook page. Alright! Janice, sir, handa na ba kayo?
Grabe, sustained ang ating viewership.
Yep.
Very good.
We actually have a total,
ma'am at mga sir.
Yeah, we have nearly 350 live participants,
Attendees.
and actually ngayon it's that number is quite amazing kasi may pasok na ang teachers ngayon, no? So talagang naghanap po sila ng oras para maka-dial in sila dito. So and that goes to show na talagang naghahanap sila ng materials and additional learnings and techniques sa assessment. So okay, Janice.
Ayan. So, yung first question natin is from Adineco Suryaga from Zoom. So, are those NGO and private organization, yung naman na-mention nyo kanina like Esta, yun yung tinutukoy niya dito, are they open for all or limited only to those who can register? May I refer this to those who are in remote areas that are not introduced to new trends and innovations?
Okay, Esta is a project. It's a research project, and the one of the aims of the project is to deliver papers and researches. So it's actually a big research, and part of that is to create the framework for public science higher education. So yes, you can share the the link sa Facebook. No, you can contact them. Pero for now, meron kasing tanong siya about registering. So we don't have yet events, okay, but we are sharing our information online. So there's no platform yet to register to, but you can follow us at Facebook if you like. And then maybe i-plug ko na siguro yung last din, ma'am. yung third National Conference on STEM Education hosted by the Philippine Normal University together with some other support groups who will jump in. Later on, we'll try to mention them, but for now, hindi ko pa mababanggit yung mga sponsors. So that's free. No? The third National Conference on STEM Education in December is free. So if you want to show or present a research work, a classroom research, an output, an innovation, please look for that event in Facebook. Third National Science, Technology, and Mathematics Conference or STEM Conference. Nasa Facebook po yun.
Maganda to kasi normally ang mga conferences na ganito, professional conferences ay may bayad at napakamahal. So take advantage po mga sir at ma'am.
Yes ma'am, and the focus of the conference is basically new normal and beyond. Yeah. So parang pa Buzz Lightyear and beyond the new normal. So STEM education now and in the days to come.
Pamain na lang daw po nung conference.
Yeah.
Pamain.
Baka pwede ko i-request si Dr. Sheila. Dr. Sheila, baka pwede mo ilagay sa chat yung link nung if Dr. Sheila or anyone from PNU could place the link to the Facebook group. Ayan. Thank you very much. Dr. Sheila, one of our previous speakers, is the chair of this conference.
Ayan pala. Ayan, shinare na po nila.
Dr. Palomar is also here. Hello, AD.
Hi, Sir ER. Hi, Ma'am
Share din natin to sa YouTube.
Hi, Sir CJ. Anyways, Janice, baka meron tayong gustong magtanong.
May gustong magtanong live, si Alejandrino Rabutan. Nandyan pa po ba siya?
Apo. Naku, may mga matatapang tayo ngayon, sir.
Please unmute yourself.
I think she cannot unmute herself.
Oh, they cannot unmute.
Natin.
Kuya, I can unmute him too.
Okay. Alejandrino? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Good morning. Is it morning still? Oh, good afternoon, Sir Alfons. I think you know me, sir. And good morning to the other resource speakers here. I think, hold on. Do I need to open my cam?
Sure.
It's up to you, sir.
Okay, so hey, Sir Alfons,
I know him.
Doing, sir?
Yes.
Well, I'm a teacher in DepEd, a senior high school teacher, and I'm very happy to see all the strategies that you've shown us, Sir Alfons. And I am also using my Open Math and Khan Academy, and I'm also trying to copy what Salcan is doing. Using this smooth draw with pen tabs, and I'm discussing those stuff live in my school. But it is really unfortunate that I know the statistics in DepEd, particularly in Las Piñas, 20% of our students that's the only percentage, that's an approximate, who are doing online. But take note, that is not online class. We are not asked to do online class. We are doing online consultation, which is very unfortunate because that is an opportunity for us to be explaining to our students what they need to learn. And we cannot deny the fact that our learners need the guidance of the teachers. Still, the teachers are experts in the field, right, sir? They really do need guidance. And there are so many misconceptions along the way. And they have to be corrected. But unfortunately, they said that we are not supposed to be teaching. We are just supposed to be orienting them on how to do their modules and so and so. But I did not follow because we are protected in this Magna Carta. That I think that is number 12 for public school teachers. And I said I have to teach. But the thing is, regarding those 20%, sir, and then some of them are senior high school students. And based on your presentation, Sarah, which is very, very enlightening, very magnificent. I mean to say, students can really learn, even though they are not in, we are here in this new normal, not face-to-face. How do you have any program or initiatives in which this gap can somehow get closer? We cannot deny the fact, sir, even during the time of when we still have face-to-face, the government did not do anything. Let me just be very clear. The government did not have or do not have any initiative closing the gap, learning gap between the poor and the rich. There is no program. My question to you, sir, do you have in your university, prestigious university, do you have any initiative wherein that gap could somehow get closer, sir?
Okay, thank you, sir. Napakaganda talaga ng pagsasalita ni Sir Alejandrino. He was one of my classmates before, no, in PhD. So, napakagaling niya ni Sir. All right, I would like to answer. Before I answer that, do you have, no, yung question? Do you have initiatives? I would like to talk about the word teach first, no. Sir Rabutan was able to mention about teaching. Okay, yung use of the word teaching. I think nomenclature lang yun eh. Alam mo yun, I would like to look at the word teach as the ultimate role of a teacher. Okay, and if it involves consultation, if it involves clarification, kamustahan or whatever, I think that's still packaged in teaching, because teaching is a multifaceted role. No, apart from that, like what I said a while ago, when we conduct our online classes, it is not like how we do it in the face-to-face. Hindi natin pagdadaanan lahat ng proseso doon. So that is why we can have some activities done offline or asynchronous. Then we can just talk about them, these things doon. No? Pwedeng the engagement part, the illicit part may be done prior. No? And some, like I failed to show what we did in the toolkit that we prepared. When I prepared the 7Es, I didn't just reflect the 7Es in online or synchronous, but also in the offline. So meaning there are parts of the lesson which we can migrate offline. And we can have some parts of the lesson which we really need to drive in the online, if ever we have that online. Now, the question of Sir Alejandrino is, do we have? Actually, there are a lot. And if you are asking for partnerships with PNU, I would just want to plug that there are SDOs which partner already with PNU. For one, we have our standing partnership with SDO Marikina. Dr. Palomar, the Associate Dean of FSTEM, part of, and other coordinators of the extension, they lead this particular initiative. So merong partnership where we help our teachers in those divisions. For example, I think I was able to mention a while ago for feedback that one of my mentees in SDO Marikina did or is creating an action research on feedback, and he is one of my mentees. No, I'm one of the mentors in that project, sir. So it's one of the initiatives also of PNU to mentor teachers, and I'm happy that in my cell, now we call that a cell, my mentoring cell, I only have no, I have 3 teachers. I mentor 3 teachers, and yeah, that's an extension project. And I think with Las Piñas, if I'm not mistaken, I was with you during the pandemic twice for
Exactly,
certain,
yes, sir.
yeah, for certain talks on integrations, creating integrative lessons, and then the other one is SIMs. So I think in the full capacity of the individual faculty, we do, no, we do share both through this or through closed door if ever, no. But if you want to partner with PNU, you can actually communicate with them, no, as an SDO. I've heard LGU Sariaya communicated, if I'm not mistaken, and they've established or forged an extension project already. So nasa usapan naman po yun. And PNU as the National Center for Teacher Education, I know will be very much willing to help the teachers, no. Of course it will be very difficult to help everyone because ang laki-laki ng scope, but we will really try our best, no, to reach out. And like especially those people who I know, they know naman na they can contact me anytime if they need any assistance, if ever I can. I'm not saying I'm the expert on that, but I'm just saying I think I'm very passionate on that particular part of being able to help that educational process realize. And yeah, we can do something as teachers. We proved that, sir, no, napatunayan natin yon na we can do something during this time of the pandemic. And with regards to the gap you're saying about the rich and the poor, that's very sad. saying the word poor is sad, no? Pagsasabi pa lang nung salitang poor, nakakalungkot na. And in one talk I gave, I remembered saying na we are in this world where the future is here. The future, we are experiencing technology and stuff like that. But we do have to remember that the perks of this future are distributed unevenly. No, some of us, some of our kids do not and would not know about Wi-Fi because it's really far from their realities. But hey, no, that's why we're people and we're teachers and we're movers because we can move on and we can do something. So, gawa tayo sir ng collab. Message mo. Pasalamat.
Ayan. Thank you, Sir Alejandrino, sa iyong question. Okay, next. So from Jocelyn Maniago, how can we directly examine student performance on worthy intellectual tasks online?
How can we directly? I don't know what the word directly would mean, no? But I would just want to say that in all of our performance tasks, no, we just factor in the essential rubric that we would need to use. So, hindi dapat wag nating aalisin yung rubric. So, very important po 'yon. And ito share ko lang. I know Ma'am Jocelyn too, no. Hello Ma'am Jocelyn, hello. Oo. And ito tip lang din, when you create a performance task, mas maganda na mayroon silang document na hahawakan. Ano yung document? General instructions. Lahat ng performance task that I create for my class, lahat yun may document, Word document, nakalagay. This task is ganito, how will you be rated, kung may format, how will you submit, lahat nandun, even the rating. Why? Because I know our students would ask a lot of questions. Pag nagtanong sa akin yung bata sa GC, sir, ganito, ang sabi ko lang, please check the general instructions.
So before you even, so yung pagbigay nyo mismo ng gagawin nila, binibigay nyo na din kung ano yung hahanapin mo later on.
Correct, lahat. So, even ma'am, yung submission, yung file name, paano isusubmit, paano i-upload, anong file, picture file ba to, video file, lahat doon explicitly stated. I think that's one thing also that we can learn this time. We have to, be explicit in all things. Kasi ang mga learners natin would have different interpretations of, these things.
Kind of giving them some examples kung ano yung hahanapin nyo.
Saka yung rubric, ma'am, very important kasi they also rated. Nalalaman, ay, sa palagay ko dapat ako 9. May mga ganun yung bata. Tapos bakit kaya 8 lang binigay? That will be a point of discussion. Pwede akong kausapin ng bata, sir, bakit po ako 8 dun sa rating nyo po? I think I deserved a 9. Pero wala pa nangyari sa akin yan, sorry. At least you can talk about it, no? Yes, very good yung sinabi ni AD, ni Dr. Palomar. You have to clarify expectations. Diba? Kaya yun ma'am, apart from the rubric, minsan kasi dinidiscuss lang natin yung gagawin, ako, meron talagang black and white nung document, nung instructions. Yun.
So may clear expectations pero hindi naman ibig sabihin na parang doon na lang sa box na yun
Correct.
So syempre yung mga estudyante natin, they're still free to be creative and step
Correct.
up sa expectations nyo.
Tama.
Okay. Maganda yung sagot ni sir. Ano yung next question?
Parang ang dami, natakot ako.
It's a beautiful thing kapag ganyan.
Yeah, I think Janice, this one is from Elvira Galvez, if I'm not mistaken. She's actually from FUSE.
Hey, wow.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so yung question ni Ma'am Elvira Galvez is, it's a beautiful webinar from Prof. Pelgone. Your delivery is excellent. Her question is it okay to assume that the brilliant ideas can be applicable to teacher training? As per sponsor of a project, teachers should be given a post-test on knowledge.
Yes po. Sige. I think there are layers in the question. So first, thank you for the the compliment. Salamat po. And is it okay to assume that the brilliant ideas can be applicable to teacher training? I think yes, ma'am. But on my end kasi as a teacher for quite some time already, I've been in the teaching profession for I think about more or less 15 years. But I respect the seasoned teachers with all those experiences. No? Pero marami naturo sa akin yung experience na to, including being with PNU. No? and being with the DepEd. So ako kasi hindi ako tumitingin talaga sa best practices as best practice. I call all of these practices as good practices. I think brilliant ideas can work with some contexts. There are ideas that don't work well in other contexts. And we can teach our teachers a lot of things, like for example, strategies, tools, and so on. But when it's their time to deliver or to use those things, that will ultimately depend on their context. Diba, for example, nag-seminar ako sa let's say technology, no, like open educational resources na nasa online. Tapos pagbalik ko ng classroom ko, nagtuturo ako sa, let's say, sa coastal areas. So some might not be that applicable. So in a general, we can train our teachers to be good in all levels, no, in all layers, di ba? Magaling sa lahat. Pero yung applicability naman nila, ang measure nito ay pag bumalik na sila sa classroom, no? So yun. So I respect the idea that all of our good practices, teachers, pwede nating pagsama-samahin and we can share to all of the teachers, our professional learning communities. And then the teachers, na yung tinuturuan natin, tinitrain natin, mini-mentor natin, they will be empowered, no, to see which good practice will ultimately work for their own context. So parang ganun yung aking take doon. And there is another question, I think, when sa ma'am, can you flash? I was not able to catch the last part of the question. Sorry. Ano ayun. As per sponsor of a project, teachers should be given a post test. Yes po, ma'am. I would agree that there should be a test, a post test. Apart from that, we would like to know also the experience. That's why there are evaluations, di ba? Apart from the knowledge that they've gained, we also want to evaluate the experience. Was it worth their time? Was there a reflection or an insight that they gained participating in that particular training or webinar or whatever, or practicum or whatever. So apart from that, maybe we can talk to them. Like for example, in this case, some of my friends have been messaging me and they were giving their questions as well in feedback. And these are good things, no, to better us, the better the experience of the rollout or the training. So
May
yes
mga,
po, ma'am.
sir, may mga kunyari yung principal or school administrators na uma-attend ba ng mga online classes. I think it's a good thing na yung parang evaluation both ng learner tsaka ng teachers na a-attend din sila. Parang kagaya ng normal na face-to-face teaching, di ba? May mga teachers na or teachers or administrators na umuupo sa likuran ng classroom tapos
nag-observe.
may mga ganun pa ba ngayon?
Meron pa naman. Pero before meron ganun, ano, yung nag-observe na faculty or ng master teachers, ganyan, to help, no? Hindi naman yun vindictive eh. Idagdag ko lang sa sinabi ni Ma'am Janice, no, na maganda kasi yung tanong ni Ma'am. Napakaganda ng online platform because noon sa face-to-face, we can only send a few teachers to train, di ba? Pag may national training, magpapadala lang one per school, minsan nga wala pa. Ngayon, everyone can train, no? Ibig sabihin, magsisipag lang talaga si teacher na mag-attend. Of course, there are limitations if ever. Pero everyone, no, has the chance to learn something na pwede niyang i-apply, pwede hindi niya ma-apply ngayon sa konteksto niya, pero baka sa susunod ma-apply niya. So, yung mga natututunan natin along the way, I'm not saying what you've learned here is new, no? You know, assessment, no? Pero I know for some parts, you were able to affirm some things. Diba? You were able to validate things that you are doing, and you at some point you were empowered. And I think that would have been the goal of my presentation. Thank you.
Yan. So, ito, last na ba to, Kuya? Last question. So, from Adine Suryaga, so self-directive learners is applicable, but the problem related to this is the lack of learning materials that students do not give enough response related to this concern. So especially to those living in remote areas in the Philippines, what would be the correct approach to cater this situation for the needs of students to be self-directive learners?
That's a very difficult question to. I'll be very honest, no. In education, you talk about a lot of things, and that would include policy. And when you talk about policy, there are people who are involved, no, because you will be tapped and so on, or you will be part of the pool whose data will be used for the reforms, ganyan. Pero in essence, policy or informed policy is a job of those in the office, no? Pero I would like to respond to the self-directed learner idea. Ultimately, I think the idea of self-directed learning is inherent to the learner, not to the context or to the material. It is a characteristic of a learner. So, kunwari, ako, hindi pa dumarating yung SLM ko, pero self-directed learning ako. Ibig sabihin ba nun, wala akong magagawa para may matutunan ako habang wala pa yung SLM? Although there are a lot of kids now with different characteristics, and like what I'm saying, being self-directed is actually a characteristic of a person. Although we actually build this up along the way, no? Na i-improve natin 'yon kasi baka nga no, I won't say na it's a yes or it's a no, pero baka nga hindi natin masyadong na-train noon na sila ay self-directed kasi na-spoon-fed niyo yung iba, no? I'm not blaming you. Pero baka naman ngayon pwede natin silang turuan na dalawang bagay. Una, hindi lahat ng kaalaman ibibigay ng guro, di ba? Pangalawa, in 21st century education, it is important that we teach them to search for learning, to search for content, and to know if that content is correct or not. Di ba? No mga bata pa tayo, guys, I know you can relate. Magpapa-exam yung teacher. Hindi naman ito sinabi ni ma'am, hindi ito tinuro ni ma'am. Pero ngayon hindi na valid yun eh. Kasi we have that chance to learn not only from ma'am or from sir. That's the idea of being self-directed, no? The materials, the context, the facilities help, but it is a characteristic of a person. Okay, for example, tayo, mas mature na tayo, mas maiintindihan natin to. Lalo na yung mga nagmamasteral sa atin, di ba, nagpi-PhD. So, nafe-feel natin na, may module, we become self-directed in a way, no? Kasi mas naiintindihan na natin yung proseso. Eventually, I think we will be able to embrace and, pinpoint our learners na to this direction na, magiging tayong self-directed learners. It will take time. Baka hindi ganun kabilis, pero pagtulong-tulungan natin. Marami tayong ginagawa, no? Itong mga talks na to, when we teach or we train, reskill our teachers, grabe yung multiplier effect nun. Guys, kahit paniniwala lang na maganda ang educational system ngayon, that you can share to your colleagues, that is a game changer. And that is a multiplier, no? Punta ka ng classroom or ng faculty room nyo, magchismisan kayo, pagkwentuhan nyo tong seminar na to. And I'm telling you, it will trickle, create a trickle effect, and everyone will be inspired to work for this educational system. So, going back, it is a characteristic of a learner. But don't forget, if we want that to be the characteristic of the learner, that should also be the characteristic of the teacher.
Ayan, ang ganda ng mga sinabi ni Sir. Eto na, since yun na yung last na question, hihingan ka na namin ng iyong final message para sa ating mga viewers na nagstay talaga hanggang dito.
Oras na ng pananghalian.
Yun ang sasabihin ko eh.
Pasensya.
No, it's all good, sir. Actually, we have a highly engaged audience. So, as always,
yeah. They're very consistent. Sir?
Final message, siguro babalikan ko lang yung sinabi ko na dalawang part kanina. Yung tanong ko, I would like for us to reflect talaga. Yung kasi we had a lot of debates on that word essential. What's essential in the time of the pandemic? What should we teach? What should we not teach? That's very important to talk about. But of course, the discourse would have to be taken on a different platform. No, we have to talk. We have to talk to everyone. No, especially those na may say like the teachers. No, and we would like to ask ourselves, ano ba talaga concern natin? No, ituro yung content o magturo ng bata na may matutunan sila. So, laging issue kasi yun yung face-to-face, no? Ang daming ituturo, ang daming competency, ang daming ganito. Pero ano yung mahalaga? Yung ituturo o yung natutunan nung bata? So, ngayong sitwasyon, ng pandemic, we have to realize na kaya nga may MELCs kasi we have to refocus on the more important parts that they will not learn if not in the formal system. Diba? Refocus natin yun. And that means that we are not just focusing on content but on how our students will learn and how we will know if they learn something. So baka naman kasi we are fronting that we are student-centered but or learner-centered, but we are not really concerned more of the student but of what we will need to teach. Parang usapan sa faculty room, ay hindi ko naabot yung chapter ganito. Yung mga ganon. Of course, competencies are non-negotiable. We have to achieve them. But we have to backtrack also with in terms of certain research. Are we achieving these competencies also? Maybe we can think about it with the right paradigm, with the right thought, no?
With the right
Pag-usapan, correct. Pag-usapan natin. Kasi baka naman ang dami or baka, di ba? Many research will have different perspectives. So yun po. And yung last po, ma'am, please tell your students they can be teachers and they can be STEM professionals.
So that will inspire them.
Let's inspire them. Kasi baka they are boxed lang kung anong gusto nila kasi yun lang nakikita nila sa TV or alam nila. Let's tell them they can teach. They can be scientists and they can teach at the same time. No, they can take pure and applied degrees and yet become part of the academe. We need the next pool of better, better teachers, better than us, no, who will teach the generations to come. So let's create that community of practice. Guys, please message me via LinkedIn or follow me via Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, sa iyong napakagandang webinar. Kuya Jeff, do you have any
Ayun.
message?
Okay, Sir Alfons, maraming salamat po. Again, maraming salamat po for tuning in again. So this is Friday afternoon in the Philippines. So alam po namin na abala kayo ngayong araw kasi may pasok pa po. Isiningit nyo po ito. But then again, para po sa tatlong organizations who have worked hard to put this together and deliver all these contents to you, sobra po nakaka-motivate kasi nakikita po namin yung hunger at saka yung passion ninyo para kumbaga may matutunang bago and then at the same time ma-elevate yung kalidad ng pagtuturo. And siguro itong what I really like about this webinar series is that yung context po ng mga pagbabahagi ng ating mga experts sa pedagogy, the contest did not only touch on the fundamentals of STEM teaching, but then again at the same time yung best practices po or tips na binahagi nila para po ma-apply natin dito sa panahon po ng pagtuturo during the pandemic. So, and I think ultimately yung mga teachers po na na-touch ng ating mga professors from PNU, I'm actually quite sure that those will be more agile teachers. So sa susunod po, hopefully wala naman, no? Sa susunod na magkaroon na naman ng disruptive event sa ating educational system, kayo pong mga nandito sa webinars natin, hopefully po kayo yung magsi-step up, kayo yung mag-i-encourage sa mga kasamahan nyo na, hindi, may paraan yan. Meron tayong mga eksperto na nagbahagi na, and it's only a matter of, getting refreshed on those ideas. So again, maraming salamat po sa inyo. We will actually end this talk now. Yun pong link to the attendance form po ay nasa Zoom chat box at nasa YouTube live chat box as well. So but gaya po ng sinasabi namin, be mindful po sa spelling ng inyong mga pangalan, email addresses kasi po we're using an automated system to generate your certificates po. So essentially what you put in is what you're gonna get out of it. So kapag mali ang spelling, mali rin po ang spelling na makukuha ninyo. And then at the same time po, medyo please be patient with us because we've been rolling out webinars every week, even minsan po ilang webinars sa isang linggo. So minsan po it takes about 10 days for us to generate the certificates kasi we send them in batches. So yun po, if after 10 days po hindi nyo makuha, sa kanyo po kami i-follow up. But then, other than that, maraming salamat po sa inyo. Maraming salamat po Sir Alfons. Janice, thank you so much for staying up late to facilitate the discussion. So sa mga nasa Pilipinas po, palagi po kayo mag-ingat. We hope that you enjoy your lunchtime. And then, again, shout out po sa mga kasamahan natin sa PNU at sa FUSE who dialed in.
Maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat sa pagpapahiram sa ating
mga
professionals.
Opo. And Sir Alfons, meron po tayong very quick debriefing session po after nito. So, yung link na send na dun sa ating group chat. So, again, maraming salamat po. Ingat po kayo
Salamat
palagi, and
po.
tomorrow. No, is it tomorrow? No, on Saturday pala. Medyo sorry po, disoriented na kami. On Saturday wala tayo, pero October 9th yung kasunod.
Oo.
Ayun. So October 9th, SEM.
Ayun muna
Learn about
sila.
SEM. Salamat po.
Salamat
Bye.
po.